Lucky love is... Oh, how embarrassing. Oh dear. Anyway, guys, how you doing? Yeah, so welcome to my study. Yes, let's see who's around, shall we? Yeah, so rightio. Oh yeah. So guys, how you doing? Just have to wait a bit till people see this. Oh yeah, how is everyone? Hey, John James, come on. Hello, come on indeed. Yeah, come on. 2 minutes late. Well, you're the first one here. Yeah. So hey, how you doing, guys? How you been? Hope you've been absolutely awesome. It wants to upgrade Mac OS. Learn more or upgrade now. No thanks. Oh yeah. So Curtis is looking good. You're looking sure? Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you what I've been doing the last few days. My school principal from 20 years ago contacted me because he saw an article that I wrote on the mysterious stone circles of Mount Elephant, which seem to have been demolished around 1877. Australian megaliths, huge structures. And in the background is a volcano, and next to it is actually, it's not seen on this picture, is actually a setting sun, made by a top Australian artist called James Curtis. And so he saw an article that I wrote about this, and he wants me to contribute to his book on Mount Elephant. So I've been writing 27 pages. I've written 27. I went absolutely nuts, and it's more than a contribution, but it's 27 pages so far. And I've found that this artist did not exaggerate. He did not embellish. It's been suggested the artist drew Aboriginals tiny compared to huge megaliths to show that Europeans must have built the structures and not them, because they have a tiny little habitation here. And I'm saying, well, the authors of that article obviously have never been camping, because these guys, there's not a permanent settlement. It's more like a tent. And they're visiting the circle to honor their ancestors. They're not making fun of the Aborigines in any way. This artist wanted to drew what he drew. This is in Melbourne. And this is close to it's not in Melbourne, it's in Victoria, in Western Victoria, the Western Plains of Victoria. And I've been reading a book that you can get for free if you are on the Facebook of Richard Patterson for Christmas as a Christmas present, and I printed it out. Australia's Stonehenge, basically a monument which is very much like what is on a loch in Scotland and the Serpent Mound in Ohio. And all three of these monuments point to a pyramid or a triple pyramid on the horizon. So straight away we see a UK connection. I reckon ancient redheads maybe in Australia. Who knows who built these? But these were megalith builders building 10-meter tall structures. The same. I contacted the author. He says, and I said, maybe the same people in Victoria. He said, absolutely. They were over a wide part of Australia. They built huge megaliths. This has been demolished, but there are megaliths all over Byron Bay in New South Wales. Just incredible. Anyway, I'll say hi to the people. So, yeah. Hey, Dallas, how you doing? Hey, Ranger Artworks. Pleasure indeed. Leon the Wise. He says, what do you make of this geopolymer nonsense? The H blocks are being touted as geopolymer. You know, I'm partly responsible for that because no one knew about this geopolymer until I started talking about it, because no one was watching the videos of Davidovitz. I started talking about it. Now everyone says, but who knows? Who knows if it's geopolymer or not? Hello, one day we will all be free. Hi, Amdroid. Hey, Dallas. Hey Mark, how you doing? You going to bed? Hey? Awesome. And hi Roxy Rocks, how you doing? Excellent. And John says, love your work when in mind. Thank you so much, John, indeed. So that's all the stuff that I'm doing. Dallas says you're about to go to bed. Yeah, I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. Okay, have a nice sleep. You know, have a good one indeed. So people, how you doing? What are you doing? Tell me what's up. Tell me what you're doing. Yeah, so I'm halfway through reading that book, Australia's Stonehenge, and it's getting very interesting. So apparently that the builders who built this Stonehenge, they had a three brothers legend. Three brothers left the old world and the center of what they called the center of the world, and they decided to explore the southern part of the world, and they came on a great canoe. And they started building these megaliths, and they're called names such as King's Mound and things like that, where kings are buried. And the megaliths look the same as ancient UK. Let me prove it to you. This is in Australia. Hi, Arkansas, Jack Torrance. Hey, how you doing? And yeah, you know, and hi, Ceci. Yeah. So let me prove it to you. I just want to show you a picture. There are megaliths all over within 10 kilometres of Australia's Stonehenge site. So do you see this picture here? So basically, megaliths at a roundabout near Byron Bay. A German has, on his property in the area, he has used some of the megaliths from the stone circle to make his own replica of Stonehenge. Unbelievable. And these are all megaliths found in the area where the ancient people landed in Australia, around Byron Bay, Mullumbimby, and various antiquaries have investigated this and have concluded that there is a stone circle here. There was a massive stone circle here, set of stone circles, serpent mounds, etc., etc., etc. Official archaeology says no way, because we know Aborigines were too primitive. So the official archaeologists are actually more backwards, stuck in the 19th century, ironically. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? And they reckon they're the clever ones. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Ceci Wilson is from South Dakota. Hello, Ceci. Hi, Riga. Am says, so do you guys celebrate Xmas in June or what? Not to my knowledge. Dallas says, you're awesome. Stay awesome. Love your videos. Jenny says, yes, I happen to be looking at my phone. Leon the Wise says, Three Brothers story sounds like the tale of the Easter Island statues. Oh, really? So the Three Brothers legend is all over Eurasia. It's especially in Eastern Europe and other countries, and it's always that three brothers came from somewhere, founded the country. One brother founded the country. Two other brothers kept moving to found other countries. And that story is in Australia. They say they came from somewhere else around Byron Bay area. The people that living there, the Aborigines living there, who were they? What's going on? Unbelievable. Yeah. And yeah, this site, Australia's Stonehenge, it was surveyed in you can get that book for free if you go to Patterson's Facebook, a Facebook group called Australia's Stonehenge, and he says just contact him, he'll give you the book. But anyway, at least the PDF. But anyway, it was surveyed in 1938, found to be true. Huge stones, some up to 10 meters tall, and megalith builders were indeed in Australia. Unbelievable, just unbelievable. So, Roxy Rock says, I had to let my Jeep go and just bought a van, Honda Odyssey. Maybe you saved yourself a lot of trouble, actually, if you got rid of the Jeep. Yeah. So Am says, what do you think about Indians visiting Australia like 4,000 years ago? I remember reading somewhere that's how they think dingoes were introduced. That's very interesting. So the invaders who came to Australia, they think they're from India or they're from elsewhere, as you say. They brought a domesticated dog with them, and which turned into the dingo over time. And these people mixed with and also partly killed off the earlier people who were here. There wasn't earlier people here since the beginning of humanity, and they kept mixing with the people coming in, the influx. And people have this night vision, this tunnel vision, where they only, instead of sitting on the fence, they want to be on either one side or the other side of the fence. So they either say, no, you can't talk about diffusion. The Aborigines had to have been here from the start. And now a series of people are coming up and saying, well, why is there this desire to separate Aboriginals in Australia from the rest of humanity? Are they a different species? Why are they doing this? But that is the correct way of doing it at the moment, which is very strange, isn't it? Yeah. So you're saying 4,000 years ago, actually there is idea that there was a intensification of Aboriginal stone tool building about 4,000, 5,000 years ago. So there was indeed something going on regarding that. Yeah. Yeah. So Jenny says they are just corrupt and overly politically correct and inclusive because it's etc. etc. Not to be, indeed. So Roxy Rock says loves your topics. One day all will be free, says Enki Enlil on Marduk. Riga says, what state is the henge in today? It's in New South Wales. But the one I'm investigating. So the reason I'm showing you this is I'm investigating another henge, which is in Western Victoria, which was also demolished. This was demolished in 1945. It's a kind of snake mound because the farmer was tipped off that the government was about to seize his land. So he ordered his son to get out something called a grader, which is a huge bulldozer, and knock down all the stones and tip them into the valley. And in 1988, there started to be talk in the media of native title claims. So again, he thought his land was going to be seized. So he got the grader and he cut one of the mounds in half to use it to build roads on his property, just in case, And he always chased the archaeologists away trying to have a look. But it has been found that there were megalith builders in Australia. And I seized on this for an article that I'm writing about a similar site demolished in Western Victoria. That site is called Mount Elephant, and it looks basically like I'll show you in a second what it looks like. It looks like that, and that has been demolished. There are two Aboriginals standing here watching the sunset. Why are they watching the sunset? Is it a solstice? And the sun is setting next to the mountain. It must be near the solstice. That mountain is a volcano. And the sun must have been setting between the two peaks of that volcano, and the Aborigines are having a look at that. And the stones obviously are about 5-10 meters tall. That site is gone. Where is it? And I'm researching that, and I'm finding out the artist was a man of great integrity, but he's being slammed in current publications as making the Aborigines look very small compared to the structures to somehow show that the Aborigines didn't build it. Wrong. The people who wrote this article don't know about the 1870s and 1880s artistic trend of luminism, by which they had a sunset, a glow in the sky, and they showed nature is considerably bigger than man. They did this with Europeans as well. So were Europeans being racist against Europeans? Does that make any sense to you? So these people who write these articles are actually extremely ignorant people. It's unbelievable. But I'm finding out this man, James Waltham Curtis, was a man of great integrity. He was patronized. His patron was the brother of the founder of Stanford University in California. They both traveled around Victoria, and they both explored these ancient sites. They traveled around on coaches, then trains, and then later on horseback, and they went everywhere. And he drew this in Western Victoria near Mount Elephant. I've been there. Can't see the stones. I've been to the top of Mount Elephant. I found huge pieces of pumice, which I've added to my rock collection. The biggest, lightest pieces of pumice seem to have floated to the top of the mountain, and that's where I found them, the mountain over there. And next to the volcano, the sacred volcano, the place of Lockie, the creator god, was this stone circle. Just unbelievable. Yeah. So we have a lost history here in Australia. So Roxy Rocks, those are the stone circles in Australia. So Jenny says, I think they found them, but they knew they were made by geopolymer, as Cleopatra did a demonstration on the Nile showing calcium, like limestone, dissolves in acid when she drank a pearl in champagne. Curtis says you're still in lockdown. No, it's all over. We just have to wear masks in where we can't social distance. So, for example, two people driving a car, they need a mask. But in a pub, no one is wearing the masks, even though they cannot social distance. I see no one's wearing them. In a shopping centre, yes, you need to wear them. In a cafe, no one's wearing them, even though they kind of should, although it's kind of difficult to drink through a mask. I don't know if anyone's tried to drink through their mask. It would be very difficult, wouldn't it? Drink a cup of coffee. Hey, CFAPs, how you doing? So CFAPs, just like the famous poverty point omphalos in America, we have the Mullumbimby. We had the Mullumbimby omphalos in New South Wales. And here in Victoria, as I pointed out, we had these stones, and we had these stones at Mount Elephant. And I'm writing an article now for my school principal's book. He was a school principal at Mount Elephant, and he contacted me because he saw I wrote an article about it. So we just met at a cafe a few weeks ago, and I'm writing an article. It'll be included in his book. About this, and I'm finding the artist was a man of great integrity, did not exaggerate this. The current trend is to say that Europeans exaggerated these stones to make the Aborigines look bad, to suggest that there was a European civilization in Australia before the Aborigines. And I'm finding actually, well, there kind of was an old world civilization. These people said who built this in Byron Bay said they came to Australia on a great canoe. And from somewhere towards the north of Australia, from an island to the north. And these were megalith builders, and they built similar things to what we see in England. Just unbelievable. And these people must have been in Victoria as well. And everything has been demolished. Bogus Hope, thank you so much. Much appreciated indeed. So there you go. I wanted to show you those fascinating things. So Gerard says, in the room, Amdroid says original people were Denisovians, maybe. Ruiger says pretty massive stones by the looks. Jack Torrens says this is far more interesting than what I was watching, lol. Ruiger says that long march through the institutions rearing its ugly, politically motivated head again. Indeed. If you go to there is a book called Dark Emu. It is currently winning all the awards. 2014, it has won all the. Do you see all these medals it has on it? So all these medals are things like Book of the Year, New South Wales winner, Book of the Year, Literary Awards 2016, Book of the Year 2016, Queensland Shortlist 2014, Premier's Awards for Indigenous Writing 2014. And this guy is criticising capitalism and so forth, and so you'll know he'll be the favourite of some of the people in the universities. But he's also towing the line of earlier researchers saying that Europeans must have exaggerated those stone circles that I showed you in pictures. But I'm finding out these artists were people of enormous integrity, especially this artist who drew the stone circles. They did not exaggerate; they drew nature as it was. And this guy is saying yes. They did this to make the Aboriginals look bad. And I'm saying, well, their argument actually circumlocutes upon itself, because they're saying that the Aborigines were oppressed by Europeans who drew massive megaliths, which the Aborigines couldn't have built. So they're saying the Aborigines couldn't have built, so they're oppressing the Aborigines themselves. I mean, it's unbelievable. This guy's part Aboriginal, and he's written about permaculture. It's actually a great book. He's written about permaculture. Permaculture is combining plants together to make them grow better. And so here you'd plant some melons, here you'd plant some yams, which are Australian potatoes, and you would come back and visit in a year, and you would harvest. And so you could work with the land. You could plant plants in the desert. Where today they can't grow wheat. The European way of doing it is just destroy everything and then plant your crops en masse and then use a machine to harvest, knock down all the stone circles. And so all our stone circles have been knocked down. But otherwise, that's a great book, apart from a few of his opinions. But I'm saying he's wrong. He's wrong on those stone circles. He mentions them. He says they're rubbish. They're fake. He talks about some interesting things. So the argument went, you see he mentions them. So the argument went, these people could not have built these monoliths. Therefore, they were a later debased race. Now, that I'm finding out that was never argued in the first place. So they're making that up for the sake of having an argument. Funny. Interesting. But the Aborigines were massacred and treated very badly. He says he's disturbed by this photograph. That photograph is a Scotsman called Macmillan, and he says this guy here looks absolutely terrified of Macmillan. They're his guides. He basically had to put a gun to their heads to take him into Gippsland to explore. There are 19 memorials to him, but as soon as they find out that he kept a bag of Aboriginal skulls, people he had killed, he killed about 80 to 90 to 100 Aboriginals. He seems to have killed these guides as well after he had no more use for them. He was a squatter. He had 150, which means he had These were the first settlers. He had 150,000 acres that he claimed for himself for cattle and sheep. But there are 19 monuments to him. As soon as they find this out, I think they're going to start knocking them down. But anyway, yeah. So what are people saying? So, wow, excellent stuff. So Alex says our history is being subverted. How? By silencing Aussie, Assange, and others who tell the truth about our war criminal leaders on both sides of the aisle in every Western government. Jack says red tape is always created by people who wear tiny hats. One day we'll all be free, says our history was reset in the 1600s. Pompeii was buried in 1631, proven by a map found of a canal that was built just before the eruption and was buried under the ash. Wow. Jack says masks are being used to get people conditioned for the virus and the real pandemic begins. Okay, I was so far behind. Sorry about that. Yeah. CF Apps says, I don't know nearly enough about ancient Australia as I should. CF Apps, you can, well, you can always get that book, Dark Emu, or you can get this one for free, Australia Stonehenge. So go to the Australia Stonehenge Facebook, and you just have to send him a message. And for Christmas, he's given it away for free. So I got it, and I printed it out. And it doesn't seem to be the final version. The grammar needs a bit of tightening up, but it's really, really interesting, actually. It talks about worldwide builders. So the same people who built Ohio built that. The Ohio Snake Mound built this as well. It was the same tradition, the same builders. Yeah, so Gerald says the new radar maps are awesome. South America looks like a jungle-covered suburb. Jenny says, you need goggles too. Try not to get the virus. It might be chronic and destroy T cells. Airborne AIDS indeed. FEMA leper colonies on the way. You know, guys, honestly, I think I had it, unfortunately. But at the time, they claimed we didn't have it here. But honestly, I don't think I've ever been so sick. It was back in April. That was ridiculous. But who knows? Who knows? Simple Man says, I shower with my mask on. Interesting. Shermanator says, hello. Hello, Shermanator. Jack says, they didn't build camps everywhere for no reason. Bogus says, Charles, the new Assassin's Creed video game is about Danish Vikings invading eastern England. What say you? You know, I say it's really interesting because when the Danes were invading England in the 900s AD, just before William the Conqueror arrived, and just a year before, and even earlier on under Knut, they say, oh, these are the Danes, the fierce Vikings coming, and we, the English, have to protect. The Saxons themselves were also from Denmark. So it was Danes fighting against Danes. They had a very similar method of warfare, just huge axes and shields. And but of course, as soon as the cavalry from France arrived with the Normans were like can you imagine who the Normans were like? They were Vikings with a Roman method of war. They quickly conquered all of UK and half of Ireland and set up their kingdom. Alex says we need to call out the subversion of history going on today. Assange is an Australian hero who was abandoned for telling the truth. He was gagged because of the Great Reset. That's true. So there is a blog called Dark Emu Exposed. And this guy is saying all the Aborigines had permaculture, agriculture, they weren't hunter-gatherers. And Dark Emu Exposed, if you look up their articles, there are about 30 historians and academics who are anonymous because if they weren't anonymous, they'd be sacked. And they're all saying, this guy, Bruce Pascoe, is full of crap. And they're saying there are plenty of hunter-gatherer tribes. And what I'm going to argue in my article is that some were permaculture agriculturalists and some were hunter-gatherers. And they were actually battling each other, warring each other all the time. They had endless war going on. If you look up, we have the first Victorian Englishman who was in Victoria was in the 1830s. He lived here with the Aborigines for 30 years before Europeans created Melbourne. He was an escaped convict. So that's why he was living here. And he wrote a book called The Life and he wrote a book through his biographer, and it's called The Life and Adventures of William Buckley, 32 years a resident of the colony of Port Phillip, and of the province of Port Phillip, which is what Victoria was called. and he lived with the Aborigines for 30 years. And his tribe was exterminated by other tribes. They had endless warfare. This guy quotes someone called Sturt, who says he never saw a weapon among the Aborigines. And so he says they were peaceful. There was no warfare. It's rubbish. It's garbage. How did they hunt if they didn't have weapons? It's a garbage argument. So Dark Emu Exposed, it's all these anonymous people writing articles saying it's full of garbage and he's rewritten history to be overly sympathetic towards the Aborigines, which is perhaps unnecessary. It's enough to say they were massacred and treated badly. Why turn them into angelic creatures, superhumans? It's not necessary and it's not true. So this guy does go too far, even though it's a brilliant book. Yeah. What are we saying? So Jenny says, I never said to get the vax. It doesn't prevent spread. It turns grandma into multi-generation households into a super spreader and kill her family off. That sounds pretty bad. Ruiger says that line of reasoning, hey. Jack says vax is the real pandemic. Experimental Elemental says see a vax. Austin says going to buy that as a Christmas prezi for myself. Shermanator says Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash. Roxy Rock says, why were the stone circles built? You can find the answer in this book here. Uriel's Machine explains why stone circles were built. It was for learning the sky, but it seems the stone circle itself was built after they'd already learned the sky. It didn't need to be used for learning the sky. They'd already learned it, or they wouldn't have been able to build the circle. But the element of constructing the circle is the process of learning the sky. Although these were completed circles, probably based on a wooden prototype or something done on parchment or paper. But that explains it. That is a very, these guys are geniuses. This is a very, I tell you what, just because something's on paper, 2 books are not equal. This book is like 10 other books. But anyway, on ancient mysteries. Anyway. So Ruiger says, hardly surprising the line in this, he toes the line in this regard as he does other ice. Yeah, so he's quoting from other historians and they're towing the current line. If you want to go far in archaeology circles, you have to toe the current line. So back in the day, people who said Aborigines were very primitive, they got all the gold medals from archaeological societies. In the 20s and 30s, they said their ceremonies were bestial, primitive. Today, they wouldn't. Today, if you want to be honoured and awarded and all this stuff, you've got to toe a very precise line. You have to do that, and then people will say, "Oh yes, he's a genius. Yes, yes, yes." You know, but this guy has rewritten history and ignored thousands of early settler diary entries showing that the Aborigines were actually quite warlike, and not all of them practiced agriculture. Most of them were, in fact, hunter-gatherers. He ignores this. He shows the plants, the agriculture, the native plants. But having said that, it's a great book. It's actually a very good book, and there's a lot of truth in it. Yeah, so what were we talking about? So Austin says, there is a story of explorers going to hundreds of acres of yam plantations in Western Victoria. You're right. That's interesting. So apparently, according to this guy, the British settlers in Sydney Harbour actually had to survive on the yam, which is a small native potato, for many years, and they grew them. But what happened was, as they introduced animals from Britain, the animals ate them all up, dug them up, and trampled the land and changed the soil, introducing new plants, which actually pushed the yam away. So that particular yam they used is extinct in the area. But they were using the Aboriginal technologies and plants to survive. And this book is very similar to the book about America, 1491, America just before Columbus, showing that the natives, the American Indians or the Australian Aborigines, created the vast open plains and the fields and the little picturesque copses of trees and so forth. They created this landscape. The Aborigines created it by burning as often as they could. If a tree fell down, they burned the head of the tree to prevent, bushfires, to protect their houses. They burned all the time to craft and create a beautiful landscape. So when the early settlers came here to Victoria, they thought, everything's laid out for us. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful place. We can put our sheep here, vast open plains. Same in America. As soon as they arrived, they said, why is everything so perfect? It must be manifest destiny. God wants us to do this and take over the land. It's all here waiting for us. But the reason it wasn't a jungle is it was shaped by man before they arrived for thousands of years. And the Aborigines, if they didn't do burn-offs, that was bad luck for them. It was being bad. So they had to do it for their own religious reasons. Yeah. Hey, Ray, how you doing? So Hype says, hello, Charles. Hello. Oh, I'm so far back. I apologize for that. Pottinger's Human says, hello, lads. Simple Man says, Sheppard is amazing. He really is. He's a great guy. Shema says, never trust an archaeologist. My View says, hello from Northeast England. Curtis says, yeah, most people had it like 6 months before the scamdemic. Yeah, everyone had it last year already, and that virus test is garbage. It doesn't pick it up. It's garbage. It doesn't pick it up. It didn't pick it up, or they hit it that they let it into everyone's country. They hit it. Simple as that. My View says, hello. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So Curtis says, I need to build a snake mound. Jenny says, me too, summer 2019, neg for flu. So you didn't have the flu, you had something else. Yeah, everyone had this weird something else which wasn't the flu, and it was awful. Simple Man says, Charles, have you seen the video that is in East Asia of a building that is pulling atmospheric electricity out of the sky? That's incredible. Put a link down. Yeah. CF App says, cool, Charles. I haven't read a book for a week. It's been a long time, eh? Bogus Hype says, Charles, my local school district has declared the swastika to be, as you know, I can't actually say these things because then they'll put my channel down. But you're saying I'm worried they will form a posse and go scrub the petroglyphs off the rocks in the desert. Damn. Actually, there was one of those here. That thing there is what you the S word. Because there were stones around it in that configuration as well. So the people who reached the Native Americans, the Native Australians, they had an element from the old world in them as well that you're describing their art. Ed Hornery says, the history had to be destroyed. Captain Crook, who never held the rank of captain. You're right, he was a lieutenant. Stole Australia under the law of terra nullius. I won't argue with you, terra nullius. But I will say that terra nullius survives today. They refuse to do forest burn-offs. In January, the whole city, we're in a big city, 5 million, was choking because they don't listen to the Aborigines. Because they think they know it all, and they don't listen to. They think, oh, the forests must have been uninhabited back in the old days, and so we don't need to burn them. Let's keep them primordial. Why would we destroy them by following the Aborigines and burning them? But as a result, we were choking for weeks and weeks on this stupid smoke, locked inside, and meanwhile outside it's tremendous temperatures. It's ridiculous, and yeah, it was a crazy start to the year because of that. So every 10 years, it'll go psycho with these fumes and everything. Yeah. So Adam Warlock says, a man from the Bronx, New York, and now in New Jersey watching you. That's how great you work. Oh, thanks so much, Adam. So Austin 1800 says, there's a very sad story of a tribe of giant First Nations people way up in the northwest of Western Australia. They lived on the islands off the coast, and they were all 6 foot plus in height. You're quite clued into this stuff, Austin. I didn't know about this. And you say very few photos and a short video of them exists. Pottinger says hello. Am says, did they fight with boomerangs? Kind of. They had to do. They had a kind of champion system where if two tribes would approach, and they would put up a champion and they'd try and spear each other. And that the guy with the shield would try and deflect the spears. And if he could deflect everything, then they might have a peace. Or that even if they make friends with each other, they'll have a battle anyway afterwards. And I've read accounts like that. So Austin says there is another book, something like The Greatest Estate. Yes, it's called The Greatest Estate on Earth by a guy called Gamma. And you say it's the story of how the entire continent was just one giant estate controlled and managed by the first peoples. Yeah, it kind of was. It was. It was the Aborigines had links between the tribes. They were actually amazing. They would invite each other to share their food resource. They would say what the distance was that the other tribe had to travel. Before they conducted burnings, they actually alerted the neighboring tribes to tell them, "Hey, we're going to do a controlled burn, to help shape the landscape, make it beautiful, full of flowers after burning it." And yeah, that's also a great book. Look, these books, even though they are slightly rewriting history, they actually are doing a good job by introducing the idea that the Aborigines and people in America, the American Indians also, they used permaculture and they shaped the landscape, they changed the landscape. And it's ironic that the governments, which are very sympathetic to the Aborigines, don't want to do these controlled burnings, which are absolutely essential. Now that you people in America, in California, have the gum trees, you guys need to be burning them off literally all the time. Otherwise, you're just going to keep having those catastrophic fires, literally, yeah. So Pottinger says the Sheppard guy is pretty good, but he talks more and more about prana and tantric sex, which is yawn-worthy. Yeah, he's really interested in he's quite interested in the Blavatsky side as well, is he? But I don't really watch him. I don't know too much about it. But yeah, his topics are really interesting for sure. Chara says, looking all nice and scruffy. Thanks. Simple Man says, Charles, your wealth of info is amazing. You know what? Because I'm reading a lot. And I'm actually going to build, when I have the money and get a job next year, I'm going to build a library in my backyard, because instead of extending your house, it's actually a really good idea. Just you can build like you can build rooms in your backyard, and I'm going to build as big as I can a library. I've got all my books under the bed because I got all the shelves out of this room, so I could turn it into a sort of study lounge with a bit of a pirate theme. That's not done yet. You see that mask up there, and I've got this writing bureau and a few other knickknacks. Sort of a pirate explorer theme. But because I got the shelves out of the way, they're all in storage, and all the books are under every bed and in every cupboard and inaccessible now. So yeah, you gotta make room. And anyway, what were we talking about? So Allison says the tribes of Israel built stone circles. Yeah. These guys, this is unbelievable. These guys are saying there was Enochian Judaism practiced in Britain before Christianity hit Britain. This Enochian Judaism was similar to early Christianity, which is why Britain became Christian instantly in the first centuries after Christ. They're saying Rosslyn Chapel is an Enochian Judaism temple. They took biblical scholars along with them to visit this temple, as seen in their appendix. The scholars said, my goodness, you're right. It is a Jewish temple. These are biblical scholars. They took them. They visited Rosslyn Chapel. It's a chapel. It's a Jewish temple or a Celtic temple, pretending to be a Christian building, a Christian church. And of course, these people were worldwide travelers because there are pictures in Rosslyn Chapel of corn. These people were in America. Maize, in other words, what the British call corn, what the Americans call maize. They say the Book of Heavenly Luminaries, a Jewish book, describes how to build a stone circle. And that's how they're saying what a stone circle is for and how it was built. So if you want to know what a stone circle is, that's the book to read. That's the best book to read, what a stone circle was for in the first place. Also, they're saying the Book of Enoch is a Jewish book, but it's also a book, along with the Book of Heavenly Luminaries, that was made in Western Europe, in England, in the Beaker People Empire. Yeah. And Enochian Judaism and Pythagoreanism seem to have been the knowledge of Western Europe. Yeah. So John says to me to Google Event 201. Bogus says, hype, you have no standing. Your case is dismissed pending further examination. And then he corrects your. Sherman Osborne says, Sheppard is awesome. Jenny says we need to back the monarchies and take over Nazi CIA America from the bankers. Anything is better than this. Let's do it like the pharaohs, heirs and to prove their worth, and the pharaoh could choose. Juggernaut says, hello, Charles. Some Mayan glyphs look like they were representing imperial-style birds. What if the Mayans were around until the early 1800s? Sounds crazy, I know, but I have a hunch. You're not crazy. Look, the Mayans, the Australian megalith builders, the American megalith builders, perhaps even the Olmecs through the Chinese have an element of ancient European, you could call it Irish Celtic artwork. This was found near the Australian Stonehenges. Basically kind of convoluted snake-like dragon statue. Aborigines tended not to do things like this. The Australian Stonehenges being this demolished structure, if you've just tuned in, near Mullumbimby. There's a book about it you can get online by Richard Patterson, who's investigating. Just fascinating. These were people who came from elsewhere, but to my mind, this kind of statue looks like one of the capitals in the Book of Kells. And it's Mayan-like as well. The capitals in the Book of Kells have Mayan-like snakes and dragons. So there were Irish trips to America, which are recorded in Irish monastic text. And of course, therefore, the Mayan version is these were Viracochas coming from the east. You know, isn't that amazing? But they were in Australia as well. These people in Australia, they said they came to Australia, three brothers on a great canoe. The Three Brothers legend is in half of the countries of Eastern Europe. The Three Brothers founded their country. That's an old world legend. Juggernaut says hello. Yes, okay. So Jenny says we got to get money somewhere. Simple Man says Uriel's machine. Pottinger's Human says brain sizes in the prehistoric times were much bigger, much larger, not just in Europe but all over the world. It seems like the world has degenerated somehow, and there was much more technology once. You know, you're so true. Isn't it amazing that the priests seem to have been the rulers, because the priests were the coneheads, and the coneheads are found in ancient, I believe they have now found them in ancient Bulgaria, southeastern Europe, which is the oldest civilization in continental Europe. Because if you look up the Bulgarian gold treasures, there were kings there thousands and thousands of years before Christ. These were the Vinca, right? The Vinca people. Just fascinating. And they were ruled by witches wearing witches' hats, and wizards wearing witches' hats, and coneheads, which was a variation of the witch's hat, you know, and these people were in America as well. So Mark says the map of Mordor is in New South Wales, and the mounds are aligned with the stars. Jenny says, we teamed up with the French monarchy to overthrow the British here. You did. And you know what? France bankrupted itself for you guys. France had a revolution after it bankrupted itself to build a fleet to fight the British and to help you guys out. Like France's aim was to suck the life out of the British Empire, to take them down a notch. And instead, they took themselves down totally as a result. Isn't that fascinating? Oh, there it goes. It's scrolled again. So it doesn't scroll until I scroll to the bottom, and it scrolls. I have to catch up with these comments. Bloody heck, there's so much. Oh my goodness, so much. Yeah, okay. Okay, I'll just skip a few. Pottinger says none of the monarchies are real anymore, or the nobles. Look at guys like Churchill, who brought into nobility. German and Polish were pretty much the last nobles, and now they are all dead. Jenny says the divine right of kings in the blood, or psychic connection to God. I'll just skip a few. Sorry about that, but just write it again if you like. So Bogus says I've got to go. Time to make dinner for the family. My view says get ready for the second pandemic starting in January. It's coming from the mutation of COVID-19, and it will be known as COVID-21. Edgar says hello from Chicago. Ruiger says initially he got money from the German industrialists who were afraid of a Marxist overthrow, but he threw out the banker cartel, and thus they were able to make some leaps and bounds even during the Depression. Experimental Elemental says Hitler was part Rothschild, so is Churchill. Go figure. Nobody important says Prescott, Bush, and Herbert Walker and Gerald Ford, etc. Ruiger says Rothschild wouldn't expel the banking system they owned. Pottinger says, ooh, a lounge and library with a pirate theme. Yeah, it's my study, basically. Austin says, information for the international viewers. Oldest human remains found in Australia date to about 42,000 years ago. Just let that sink in for a bit. And if you consult Steve Strong, etc., they found skulls which are 500,000 years old in Australia. Don't ask me how they dated them, though. I guess with other means of dating them. I think through geology. Ruiger says the USSR was their creature. They didn't need a Central European puppet. Their bid was a Marxist overthrow of Central Europe. You know, yeah, what happened to Europe in the 20th century is just unbelievable. 19th century minds could never have conceived of what would come. Can you see? Can you, you know? I mean, it's just unbelievable what happened in Europe. Yeah. That's why I'm in Australia, because my father was unable to return to Poland because of the communists, basically, because he was on the wrong side of the fence. Yeah. Greg says Atlantic artwork. Nobody important says Antipater the Idumean was Herod the Great's father. Antipater is a funny word. It means anti-father. But it's a Greek word, isn't it? That's a Greek name. Antipater, they call him Antipater. Edgar says Maya Prince went after Venus. Terry says, hi Charles. Philosopher says ancient Masons. All right. Evan says coneheads must be French. Shiloh says Serbia is the oldest. Terry says, have you been to Black Mountain? Never. Terry says greetings from Katoomba. That's in the far north, isn't it? You're near all these sites. Yeah, you're near all this amazing stuff. Edgar says long necks of Jasher. Greg says some churches wear hats to emulate those who had large skulls and cranium size. Bingo! Bingo! Absolutely, you're absolutely right. Terry says, do you know the work of Well Thornhill and David Talbot? In fact, I bought one of their books, and it's genius work. But I'm finding out they are not the first. They are very good researchers. However, they are brilliant, and congratulations to them for bringing their knowledge to the world. Acid says reality is based on base 60. Oh, it's obvious. You're right. How could I have not seen that before? Blue Sky says all these sculptures were built in the first Earth age. Nobody important says Laodiceans and Idumeans. You mean these never actually existed Greeks? You mean the Spartans? Just the concurring two tribes full of stories. You know, the Spartans seem to be. Are they Jewish, or are they from Egypt? Because they had and what about that? Because that apparently the Spartans are different to all the other Greeks. They had a different culture, and that they acted. The reason they had such a warlike society was because they knew they were different and they knew they were foreigners. They had to defend themselves, so they were forced into creating that kind of elite society which favored the strongest, and totally opposite of countries today which promote the cause of the weakest. You know, we're the opposite of ancient Sparta, isn't it strange? Even knocking down the strongest. We knock down the strongest these days, don't we? They're not allowed to be the strongest, you know. Oh, this is a statue? Knock that thing down. How dare they be the strongest? How dare they be famous? Okay, so Austin says the link to a number of ancient complexes is measurement. Pyramids in Egypt, South America, and even China are all metric. You're right there. Metric is ancient. Lots of people are telling me this. I saw it myself when I saw the Sumerian system actually seems to be partly metric, which is based on the dimensions of the Earth. So they knew the dimensions of the Earth. We know they knew the dimensions of the Earth thanks to this. And a book called the Stonehenge Computer Disk. He worked it out. He found out the Minoans have the same system as ancient Britain. Unbelievable. Gerald says, Dag Vogt or Carl Munk ring a bell. Indeed, they do. Nobody important says Jash's deceitful garbage fraud. Greg says, yes, Gerald Vugster. Who's that? Philosopher says, a never-ending lockdown. Nah. But we're not locked down anymore, but you guys might be. We're not locked down, but there's still a few restrictions, like masks everywhere, except everywhere where you can't social distance. And we don't have the virus anymore, but New South Wales is getting the virus, and now it's their turn to have a lockdown. South Australia has had a miniature lockdown. They were all laughing at us in Victoria, but now they're going to get it because they're going to. You cannot be complacent with this thing, whatever it is. But as we've said earlier, we all seem to have had it already earlier on this year or last year, and the tests are garbage because they haven't picked it up. I'm quite angry about that. Yeah, I reckon that and the guy who invented the PCR test. The PCR in the first place says the tests are garbage. They're using PCR on the tests. Anyway, Terry says, Charles, my brain is as big as Jupiter. And he also says, Zeitgeists, Peter, if your brain was as big as Jupiter, how do you fit on the Earth? He says, Peter Joseph, an astonishing group of documentaries. Blue Sky says the first age ended about 13,000 years ago. Juggernaut says, Charles, have you heard of the colonial exhibitions? I haven't. Greg says, research the Paracas. Pottinger says monuments are based on the yard, not the meter. Yeah, you're correct about that as well. Nobody important says Sparta, but actually they're also based on the foot. The pyramids are actually, it has been found by, I forget the name of the guy, a prominent English antiquary back in the 70s. He discovered the pyramids are a precise, very round number of Greek feet. They have been built. Their unit of measurement is most appropriately probably Greek feet. And the other guy who really measured the pyramids accurately is William Fix. He seems, and Graham Hancock, largely to my mind, is following on from the theories of William Fix, who is barely known, and his books are kind of rare. But he championed the same thing, worldwide civilization using the same units of measurement everywhere. The feet, the inches, it's not just feet, inches, yards, it's also chains. A chain is a bigger unit of measurement. No one's trying to measure how many chains big Stonehenge or Avebury is, but they're going to find exact numbers. It's going to be really interesting. And then there's more. There's units of land measurement. For example, all the blocks of land here traditionally in Victoria have been a quarter acre. And a quarter acre is known as a rood. So even a quarter acre, so that means all the blocks of land. So I happen to have a quarter acre. Now, forget about it. There's 5 million people. You forget about it. People are starting to cram into flats and apartments. But a quarter acre is a rood. It's a unit of measure. How many roods, therefore, is the area of the Great Pyramid? Has anyone bothered to find out? What if it comes out as an even number? I haven't checked. You see what I mean? So there is so much to check here. When I started checking the weights of Stonehenge, the Stonehenge things, I found it out. They started coming out as sacred numbers of a unit called the hundredweight, which is intermediary between the ton and the pound. Why would they? So archaeologists measure everything in tons. So everything's one and a bit, one and that bit, one and this bit, one and that bit tons. The ancient people didn't think this way. They thought in hundredweights. So a pyramid block, I found, is an average of 30 hundredweights. Perfect, like 30 pieces of silver, a perfect old unit of measure. So we're actually using the wrong nomenclature, the wrong units to measure everything. Archaeology is screwed. So, yeah. So nobody important says Spartans, tribe of Simeon, and Idumeans, tribe of Esau. Blue Sky says nobody correct. Most people don't know that. Richo's hunting treasure. You have an interesting channel. A channel name. I think they're a megalithic word at Grabengulen. Blue Sky says, Romans red thread line of the tribe of Judah. Nobody important says, sometimes I'm even surprised at things I know, and that's typically iceberg. Lynn Poe says, could the Giza pyramid have been built as a time capsule from the last ice age? Nelson says, hey, how's it going? I loved your book recommendation videos a while back. I read a few and they were awesome. Oh, awesome. And you've no doubt, I haven't checked the comments on that yet, on that video. I asked people to check comments and get back to me. So thank you so much for getting back to me and reading those books that I recommended. So a few months back, I made a video recommending some books you could read that I found very fascinating indeed. And I'm really happy you've read them and that you've got enjoyment out of them. That's amazing. So, woohoo. So I am again back too far. Yeah. So nobody says tip of the iceberg. Greg says some cardinal points are slightly off the true north, etc. Some pyramids due to land shift. Dates that can be made more clearer based on this fact. Jenny says, a guy wrote a couple books on Sumerian economics. Apparently they had a good system and debt forgiveness. Yeah. Blue Sky says, Leviticus says forgive all debt after 7 years. Nobody says, no tribe of Judah, it's the tribe of Eshau, the legacy of Ishmael. Gerald says the last end was 12,000 years ago. You say someone says they've recently defined the Peruvian foot. Blue Sky says great pyramids are built in inches and feet. Simple Man says World's Fair. Let's talk about it. You talk about it. I don't know what that is. Greg says if all humankind was wiped out in great floods, etc., there would not be records from around the world. Austin says, just out of interest, an acre is about the amount of space one man could plow in one day. Aha, is that where it comes from? That's quite interesting indeed. You know, there are so many of these old units. We are only using a few in our modern civilization, a few of these old units, but there's so many of them. Acid says base 60, 24-hour speed of sun. Blue Sky says Phoenicians were the tribe of Dan. Austin says that could be why the word Dan is everywhere around the ancient world. The Danans, the Danavans in India, the Dardanelles, the Danube River. You know, this has been noticed everywhere. Lots of names are noticed everywhere. It's quite interesting. Austin 1800 says the Newcastle hieroglyphs have not been partially read by actual experts. Tell a story of a shipwreck and lives lost, etc. So the people I've spoken to who really understand this, apparently they say, look, there's something going on there at that place. Nelson de Pascal says, my favorite so far is Sweat of the Sun, Tears of the Moon. The Easter Island one is also made. Yes, so the Easter Island book that I recommended, Aku Aku, and Brian Foster, who I think, because he says he watches my channel, he has read that as well, and he made a video about that. Very fascinating. Tor Heyerdahl, he gets stuck in a booby trap down. He's trying to get all their treasure to his silly little Norwegian museum, and he gets stuck in a tunnel, and he can't backtrack because what happened was one tunnel that is going one tunnel that is he has a choice of tunnels, but when you take the wrong one, you can't see the obvious way back for some reason. Because you can't see where you've just come from because it's obscure. So it's a booby trap designed to trap you. And he gets trapped in there and he doesn't know what to do. It's quite an interesting book. Witch doctors cross-examine him, and if he gives the wrong answers, they're going to kill him. If he gives the right answers, they're going to give him the treasure. Somehow he uses his intuition to get the right answers, and they give him the treasure. It's their family treasures. And he ships it all off to a silly museum in Norway. So he's depleting the island of all their ancient artifacts in the 1940s and 50s. His books are very interesting. However, he's a very conceited person. He's got a bit of an ego as well. And that does come out in his books. He's got a bit of an arrogance about him as well. Sweat of the Sun, Tears of the Moon, I've read 3 times. It's genius. There are a few books by that title, so be careful. but you've got the right one. Gary Louis or something like that. Louis is his name. And yes, it's a genius book. I'm very happy that you've read it and loved it. It's an amazing book. There has been a follow-up, by the way. A guy in the early 2000s or late 90s, he met that same old guy, but this guy is just a nasty individual, and he was looking for, it's basically a clone of that book, vastly inferior. It gets like 2 stars on Amazon. Not worth reading at all. So Jenny Simon says, time capsule Great Pyramid would be awesome. Too bad all the writings on the outside. Nobody Important says, Aryans were very diverse. I think pyramids, Greece, Baalbek, etc., all built by Caucasus Aryans, not the German translation either. Shermanator says, pre-Inca writing. Pottinger says the Aryans had mostly RH negative and they have at least some influence almost everywhere. Gerald says, the next end is 26 years from now. Nobody says the Danes of Denmark definitely argue that Phoenicians aren't Danites. Well, but here's the problem. Here's the problem, nobody. What do you mean? Who is a Phoenician? So the Phoenicians, they seem to have inherited a heritage of Baalbek and the great building works. What is an ancient Phoenician? Just because the Phoenicians today are basically Lebanese people, bear in mind the Lebanese people are not Arabic people. They were Christians until an Arab influx until I think it was the 1960s or the 1970s. They were a Christian nation. They were basically similar to ancient Greeks. So who really are the Phoenicians, you see? Anyway, Simple Man says, I concur with Nobody Important. Rufus Cat, hello. Hello, Rufus Cat, says, Julian calendar was changed to reflect the change in the stars. Nelson says, I've heard things about the Chicago World's Fair and then them demolishing buildings which have been ancient structures. Oh, I'd love to know about that. So there was a World Fair. You see, I'm so interested in this kind of stuff because, you know, these World Fairs of the 19th century, the brilliant, do you know, the brilliant Crystal Palace in England, it was their version of like a lunar moon mission, you know, acres of area, you know, I think it was 30 or 100 acres of area, millions of panes of glass. They built the ground floor out of iron. They built the upper floors because it would have been too much iron, just wood. So it was wood and glass later on. And they had to demolish it. Why demolish it? It would have been too expensive to maintain, I guess. But the expense of having built it, wasted, unbelievable. It was a gift from Queen Victoria, by the way, in that she gave her some of her land at Kensington Palace. So Kensington Palace, if you go there, it's next to Hyde Park, Kensington Gardens, and there was land next to the palace where she was born and where she died in the same room, I think. And you can walk inside a palace. It's actually very tasteful. It's kind of modest. It's kind of modest. She didn't live an extravagant life. There would have been plenty of country houses, I tell you, owned by the Earls of England, who lived in much grander residences. Like, her place was tiny by comparison, but the grounds outside became the Crystal Palace, and all around the world we have fabulous structures built. Here in Melbourne, the exhibition building, which is made of wood, and it's still standing. It looks like something in Milan. It's got a beautiful what are we talking about? Yeah. So Nobody says you're O negative. Good to know. Simple Man says, who was it that said they were sacrificing a goat for Star of Bethlehem? I don't know. Greg says, Gimpy Pyramid. Nobody says living Cro-Magnon in the house. Hey, Cro-Magnon. Gerald says O negative as well. Who would have thought so, lol? Simple Man says the World Fairs were very interesting. Also, all the fires in 1800 regarding built stone churches. Jenny says, ask Brian Forster if they ever told him the RH factor in the Peruvian mummy DNA. Send him an email, I think. Nelson says the relationships Tor made with the locals were great. So you're referring to Tor Heyerdahl. Yeah, he was, I tell you what, Tor Heyerdahl was one slick character. Definitely, you'd have to count your fingers after you dealt with him, especially if you were an Easter Islander who happened to have a bit of treasure about you around lying about the house. Yeah. So Gerald says, so the girls said, nobody important says, look up Monday and see Odin's cross. Acid Cube says, look at his head. He is a red giant. You mean Tor Heyerdahl? Yeah, he is. So the Easter Islanders who saw Tor Heyerdahl, they said, oh, you're an Easter Islander. And he said, what the hell are you talking about? And he said, no, I'm from Norway. And they said, trying to pull the wool over our eyes. We know you're a native. And he said, what do you want about? It turns out the long ears look exactly like him. They look like Norwegians or blondes or redheads. But they were extremely few in number by his day. And then after he had the misfortune of turning over a stone to find it was actually a flattened stone to find out it was actually a primitive statue, they said, oh, well, that proves you're a native. Otherwise, you would never have known that, would you? Oh, that was an accident, yeah. So he couldn't escape. But then he used that. Since I'm a native, give me a treasure. What do you think of that? Yeah, he was so slick and smooth. So he said but he introduced himself as a long ear from Norway. So Austin said many years ago, we discovered. Oh, he also John says, have you ever checked out the Arran Island, Galway Bay? So Galway is an amazing. It feels like you've entered something like Port Royal or a pirate town. An amazing, beautiful town. There's this something that sounds like a sea shanty. It's a song by Steve Earle, but it's a more easy on the ears version because his voice sounds like 100 pack of cigarettes a day mixed with razor blades. His version of so it's a better version of Galway Girl being played everywhere, and it's an amazing little town. And Columbus visited this town, and he noticed a trade wind blowing at him continuously. Oh, there's his route back from America. And but hardly anything from Columbus Day survives because, like Port Royal or other pirate cities, it was almost buried beneath the waves by a tsunami, which occurred, I think, in the 1700s, and it demolished everything. So, but there are a few things left around the docks, a few bits of old medieval things left. But I've never hopped on the ferry to go to the Arran Islands to see the monastic ruins where there are things that look like Peruvian ruins. So, yeah, you got a good point there. Austin says, many years ago, we discovered a giant stone head in Sydney. Here is a Google Map link. Okay, I'm going to open that up in another window and I'll look at that later. But I'll just have a look now. So I'm opening it up and having a look. So it's called Stonehead Reserve. No wonder it's called Stonehead. So I'm going to look at the photos. So I'm going to look at the photos based on your link. There's the Stonehead. What the hell is that? Is it where'd it come from? There's a stone head there, and there's a dead rat. Campbelltown City Council. Whoa! There are stones around there. What the hell is this place? Is it near Byron Bay where there are other stone monuments lying around? That's incredible. No one's ever heard of this. I'll look at the reviews. Can you guys still see me? Just unbelievable. This is Stonehead Reserve. In the late 70s or early 80s, the head was discovered by Sonny Burton, the bricklayer. He grabbed his best mate, Henry Angus, the plumber, from O'Sullivan Road, and they manhandled it up and out. During a process, screams were heard coming from a boy who had fallen from a tree and was hanging upside down by his foot on the V of a branch. The head was face down, more than a knee deep, when found. It had a crack running through it, which is why it is in two pieces. They were digging up a footing trench for a small wall which was being built, long gone now from the photos. I was there and saw it being unearthed. I always wondered if it was somehow related to the weird core holes and carved rocks found in Smith's Creek. Look, I honestly think if that is real, that is one of the carvings made by these people from Byron Bay at Mullumbimby who did that, which I've discussed earlier in the video at great length, so I won't repeat it. But watch earlier in the video if you're just tuning in. You're going to hear amazing things, which will make the eyes pop out of your skulls. So maybe you shouldn't watch it after all. The head was chiseled. Someone says, I believe the stone head was chiseled out by a bored water cloak worker back in the 60s. And that's it. Interesting. But if it was chiseled out, why are there other stone small minor, we can call microliths in the area? That's strange. Okay, anyway. Yes. Okay. Gerald says the planet had just one language in the past, at one time. Proof of glacial society in the past. The same texts are being found in stone worldwide now. East Coast Bakery says, hi, Charles, your videos are great. Thanks. Mark says, party like a wild cat this Christmas. I intend to. Guess what? The other day, I'm heading out to a Christmas party. And guess what happens? I hop on the tram. My ticket doesn't work. Oh, okay. So everything's falling apart. You can't even cross the street sometimes due to all this rubbish happening because the lights don't work. But my ticket doesn't work. Then I try to go to, I think, okay, I'll take the car. Guess what happens halfway? I get halfway there to the Christmas party and my car breaks down. So I'm just waiting there. For 2 hours for a tow truck, and my car is still not repaired because all the mechanics are out and about going off to have a holiday. So it won't be repaired for a week. You see, all this garbage is happening. Look, that's me. Look, I'm just stuck in a street, waiting and waiting. Unbelievable. What are we talking about? Sorry. So Pottinger says the Crystal Palace burnt down mysteriously. There is a heat ray conspiracy theory. If you look at stuff inside, there was tons of weird stuff on display. Huh. I wonder if one of the electrical exhibits exploded. Maybe an arc lamp or something ignited something else. I'm gonna have to get now. Now you've ignited my curiosity. I'm gonna have to get a book on the Crystal Palace. You see what you've made me do? Simple says, yeah, the Paris Crystal Palace was insane. Simple Man says, I'd give anything to go to that era. Yeah, it would have been amazing, eh? You can get some vestige of that era by looking at some old movies. I watched the 1979 Time After Time, just a brilliant movie. And I thought that this is incredible. I watched that a few weeks ago, and I thought, wow. And basically, H.G. Wells is a time traveler, which is why he was able to predict the future, because he built a time machine in that movie. And he goes to bring back Jack the Ripper. And Jack the Ripper tells him, who's played by that English character with that voice like this, Jack the Ripper tells him, you see all this violence on the television? This is in the 1970s. We haven't gone forwards in time. The utopia you envisaged doesn't exist. We've gone backwards. So the future has gone backwards since the Victorian era, which was the best, I think the best, most civilized time ever. You know, we've really gone backwards. So Pottinger says the Peruvian mummies had over 50% Rh negative. Muddy says, 21st star live stream. Yeah, look, I'll tell you what, if it's in the sky, we'll do a live stream, okay? Yeah. The Jerusalem star. East Coast Bakery says, Charles, have you heard about the 18th century fake ruins phenomenon? Yeah, so what happened was, there's fake ruins in this is what you're talking about. In gentlemen's gardens, country houses, there was something built to add to their garden. So they had a formal garden, right, in the 18th century. They hadn't yet had the 19th century idea of planting a informal garden, just like a forest. So there was a formal garden. The gardens had rooms separated by hedges since the Middle Ages. But what they would do, they thought, okay, where do we have a party? Pleasure gardens. So they built the pleasure gardens with fake ancient ruins everywhere, rivers and mountains and valleys, and anyone with an upper class kind of mindset starts to build this in their own backyard, which is interesting. Although I wish I could do that. I don't have money. So nobody says so many frauds from the 1800s. Sherman says Gabby Plum. Nobody important says like Brontosaurus. Nonsense. Simple Man says, and it wasn't just the palace, Charles. They demolished so much stuff in the 1800s, all the way up to World War I. Even buildings that weren't in the World Fair were demolished. It's so unfortunate. The reason is in the 20th and even in the 20th century, they saw these old buildings as ugly old things until the 1970s. And then after they had demolished most of them, they said, "Oh, what have we done? Oh, we got to protect them. Oh, you know." So yeah, but the people who inherited the buildings immediately, the second generation or third generation of people who inherited those buildings about 60 years after, they said, "Let's demolish this old rubbish." And the next two generations said, "No way, we're keeping them." But you know what? They're still demolishing them. Yeah, unfortunately, around here in Melbourne, there's nothing even Art Deco anymore. It's all being demolished in the city. Let alone the grand Victorian buildings of the 1870s and 1880s, the Gilded Age, which the Art Deco replaced. So everything has to go. It's all got to go. Amanda says, "Woohoo!" Hello, Amanda. Jim says, point of info, Crystal Palace built in Hyde Park, then moved to Penge. They moved it? How the hell would you move it? That thing was enormous. And if you visited one of the great old American or European glass houses, you see the most intricate, grand architecture sculptings. And I visited one in Dublin, their botanical gardens, their national botanical gardens. You're in these epic glass houses, and you go from room to room, like one room. It's like you're in a fantasy world. It was raining outside, so I just waited in the glass house for like literally 2 hours. And you know what? That was some of the best 2 hours I ever spent, just waiting, looking at the plants, and just sitting in there. And you see the grand white sculptured Victorian era work, ironwork, and these buildings were beyond the imagination. They're built by real geniuses. Yeah. Right. Nelson Pascal says, next, so I recommended some books in my recommendations video. He says, next on my book list, Confrontations. Oh, you're in for a treat. Oh, my goodness. Amanda B says, and do read his other 2 books in that trilogy as well. But Confrontations is the standout. His other 2 books, his final book, I believe, Revelations, he basically kind of says why he quit the field, because it was getting too weird for him to handle. His books are remarkable because he sort of takes he sort of almost, it's going too far, but he almost takes the point of view as the narrator in a Lovecraft story. So, you know, the narrator in the Lovecraft story is an innocent chap similar to Lovecraft himself, fascinated by antiquities and architecture, who then proceeds to have strange things start happening to him, which kind of destroy his life. So he often doesn't come out sane by the end of the book. That's a Lovecraft story, and these strange things are happening to Mr. Jacques Vallée. If you go to Jacques Vallée's website, he's still researching, and he's reading old theology books to find UFO information. Yeah. I've read all of his books except for one, which is very expensive, I think, from the 70s, to try and unravel the UFO phenomenon. Yeah. So, so what's everyone saying? I'm so sorry that I'm yakking on. Vondeloo, hello. Oh, Amanda, you've written so much. Hi, Amanda. Yeah. Amanda says, I can film some stuff for you, babe. Thanks, Amanda. That'd be nice. Nelson says, Strange Telescopes was also an... Oh, you've read Strange Telescopes. Awesome. You've really taken my advice here on the good books to read. So if you want this book advice, go to my book or my video a few months ago on the subject. Just look in the uploads. So you say Strange Telescopes was an amazing read. Didn't know so much about post-USSR Russia. It is indeed. So the bloke is visiting a guy who claims there's ancient tunnels under Moscow, and he keeps pestering him to show me the underground cities. And eventually the guy explodes, and because presumably they never existed. And he's meeting all these strange characters, and it's stuff that could only happen in Eastern Europe or Russia due to their unique mentality and view of the world and the way they, anyway. So Vonderly says, hi, hello, hi, eyeballs. Nobody says Canary Islands, Berbers, Celtici, Frisians, Doggerland, Irish negative. So basically the Atlanteans. Amanda says, come to Queensland. I'd love to pop over, and see the, I'd like to go to the Gympie and also the Byron Bay, wherever that is. I don't know much about New South Wales, to see all the megaliths. There are lots of megaliths. You apparently drive around Byron Bay, there's megaliths everywhere. Simple Man says, I have so much Coke, guys. Want any? It's snowing over here. Whoa. Amanda B says, eat a board, new hide a lot. West Ryde is an example. Water. Curtis says, ha, ha, ha. Curtis says the world, and Curtis was the first one here today. Curtis says the world's fairs are a total covers for destruction of history. Those world fairs, just amazing. I would have... The people who got to attend them, can you imagine? It was the best thing in the steampunk era. Austin says waterboard worker story is wrong. In the creek at the back, there are further core holes and other carvings. We played amongst them as kids 40 years ago. So you reckon that the carvings are real? So earlier on, we looked at something called the Stonehenge Reserve. I'll just quickly put up a link. Check the Stonehead. Honestly, check the Stonehead. Unbelievable. Here in Australia. So you're saying it's real. That's good to know. And you say your dad was a plumber. He knew all the waterboard guys' stories wrong. So it was there. I believe you, because there were carved heads like that over here at Mullumbimby near Byron Bay, also in New South Wales. There were carvings like that. So that's an Easter Island statue in Australia. I want to visit that. That's on the IT. You know what? Next year when all this virus rubbish goes away, I want to go and have a look. So Simple Man says, 2 hours for a tow truck? Jeez. Nobody says Frisis, Vispain, Etiam est, Ardentes, Straminis, Fasciculus. These are kind of obscure words. I'd love a translation. But it sounds like someone's motto, doesn't it? Jenny says, let's all move to Liberia and build some geopolymer pyramids. Best idea I've heard all day. Take my money. Let's go. Austin says, Ripon Lee Estate in Melbourne has some great gardens, just as you described, grotto and everything. I think I've been there. I think, I don't know. I'll have to go. Ricky says, Chuckles. Hey, Ricky. Pottinger's Human says, I saw some guy that said Churchill would phone up Hitler and tell him places to demolish that he wanted gone because they were inconvenient. Simple Man says, well, you know what? Hitler was the right guy to demolish things, let me tell you that. So he definitely went straight to the right place. Pottinger says, I saw some guy that said Churchill would... Simple Man says, you better sacrifice a goat, Charles, on the live stream, see what happens. Now, Simple Man says it's snowing and he's got lots of stuff. Pottinger's Human says this made no sense till I saw some of the places wiped out were full of rare books and you got to wonder what was in them. And you're referring to that. Okay. There have been a lot of demolished wonders. 19th century people have visited that no longer exist. Nobody Important says the Osman Empire was the most incredible in our historical records. Would you be Turkish, Mr. Nobody Important? Ricky Spence says, I'd say, but you're right. It was an incredible empire. Ricky says, I'd settle for Cubopedia at this point. What's a Cubopedia? Acid Cube says Q. Is that where Ripon Lee is? Amanda says Botanical Gardens in Sydney is cool. I didn't get to go. That's unfortunate. Or did I? No, I did go. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice. You're saying it was Trippy Magical Gardens. The one in Brisbane's incredible. I got to, whoa, as well. You got lost in the music section of the park. Nobody says Suleiman was an Osman. Nobody Spence says Victoria greenhouses were beautiful. Tasmaniac says, "G'day from Tasmania, great channel." Thank you so much, Tasmaniac. Would you be from Hobart or Lonnie? Von der Loo says, the Milwaukee Domes are pretty nifty. Amanda B says, "Don't read my bad spelling and nonsense, Charlie, sir. Lol, God help us. God help us." Oh, dear. Sorry, I'm not keeping up. Nobody says Osama bin El went to Tim Osborne at CIA training in the 80s. Ricky would love to go to the Vatican dungeon. Can you imagine the reads? Amanda says, "Love it, the world is turning into one of his novel." Ricky says, "Lovecraft is quite a creature creator." He was. Pottinger says, "I think the Vatican burned everything good already." Nobody says Mohammedans and Turkestanians equals Great Tartaria. Pottinger says Athanasia Kircher had some very interesting things. Yeah. Pottinger says, like his maps that seem to imply the Earth was hollow and Atlantis was in the far north where there was daylight 50% of the time. Amanda B says, "I'm from Sydney." Todd says, "Jimmy from Bright Insight is live right now." Whoa! Now you're all going to disappear. I don't mind. Pottinger says, "In Ireland and Germany, there were some stories about a land where the sun always shines in the far north." Nobody's Business says, "HP was an OTO member of good standing." Simple Man says, "Good standing? Lol." I read a funny site. There's a funny site about black magic. It says that nothing good happens to people who practice black magic, Lovecraft included. Presumably he practiced it. Well, he kind of had a chemistry lab, and he kind of tried to do some of the things he writes about in his novels. But it says that it funnily says Lovecraft was offered by someone in Germany to translate Mein Kampf. And it says that Lovecraft was actually prejudiced enough to do it, and his friends had to talk him out of it. How funny is that? So that's probably why you say good standing law. So, well, one of the reasons, because he was an unpaid hack writer living in poverty, although he came from a distinguished background and a wealthy background in earlier generations. So Mark says, "Jimmy can wait. I'm busy." Yeah. So Pottinger's Human says, and Kircher also talks about Atlantis being drilled out by a giant drilling machines like in Journey to the Center of the Earth, and that being the reason it sank. Simple Man says, "Charles, don't apologize for giving us your wisdom. This is great. I really love your wild streams." Oh, thanks so much, Simple Man. Amanda B says, "Waterboard my uncles," and that's in reference to that link I just put there showing this Easter Island-like statue. Let's have a look at the statue. It looks like a I'm going to check out the photo. So there are a couple of megaliths around. So it's got to be, is it close to Byron Bay? It's got to be around there where the other megaliths are. It's something with huge lips, a nose, and two eyes. You know what it is? It's a variant on an Olmec statue. It's also it's clearly an Easter Islander looking type statue. Very interesting indeed. Does it look modern? I don't know. Not really. Doesn't look modern to me. It kind of looks like an ancient statue. Yeah. Pottinger's Human says, there is a map of Utopia, and interestingly, it lines up more or less on all sides. It's like a self-contained world, which makes sense for it being inside of Hollow Earth. Todd says, did you know Jimmy Bright Insight is also live right now? Jimmy's a very nice guy, I have to say. He's very nice. He's very nice. And yeah. So East Coast Bakery says, and he told me, I wish you could have been. He said to me, I wish you could have been here with us in Egypt. Yeah, it would have been nice. I wish I had the money and the government allowing us to leave the country, which it doesn't. So East Coast Bakery says, Charles, does your really old dictionary mention Tartary? No, I don't believe. If it does, Tartary is just a name of West China or Siberia, and it would mention it in that context. Amanda B says, alter aren't two-eyed, and goddamn, I want to see some of Sydney tunnels. Simple Man says, lol. Pottinger's Human says, there are some NASA videos showing water drops spinning in zero G and they eventually turn into hollow spheres. Amanda B says, nope, give up. Too hard making sense today, I reckon. Simple Man says, America is a slave colony. They just realized that it's cheaper to pay slaves a minimum wage than to keep them and provide healthcare and a roof. You know what? When I was in Michigan, which is kind of a poor place, I had that feeling that it was like being in medieval Europe where, and I don't want to insult anyone, but there seems to be a faraway rich corporation that everyone is working for, and yeah, there's a lot of that in America. Yeah, it's the problem is there's been so much freedom that the corporation has seized that freedom partly, you know, and it is permitted that there are these huge oligarchical, aristocratic-like corporations above people, which are worth, you know, almost $1 trillion. How is that legal? It's strange. Anyway, like who voted them in? You know what I mean? Anyway. Christian P. Norris says Dresden. Sherman says pre-Inca writing. Jenny says OP equals quarter pound. Dab time. Ricky Spence says, where is it? Bring it back. Oh, I'm so far behind. So sorry. It's an underground town in Outback where they mine opals. Oh, you're talking about Cubipedia, yeah. Nobody important says Frisian Vispain, which fell from the burning of straw bundles, referenced by Will of the Wisp. Todd says your thoughts on young Gudrias. Man, I don't know anything about it, really. Verity Walker says ForgottenOrigin.com also talk about this. Curtis says, are there any good rituals that were done on the Star of Bethlehem appearance? I don't know, but I'll put out my next video. I'll say that 3 kings were actually Jews who came back for the star. That's why they were going to Jerusalem or Bethlehem. Why would they be going there if they were foreigners? And the other thing I'm going to say is, well, one of them was black, so they obviously didn't all come from the same location. They came from the 3 different continents towards the center of the earth, Jerusalem. Pottinger says, just look how they define slavery when talking about the Nazis. Well, it's clear we're all slaves if we had to work. Also, if we try to build something on public land, it's jail time. Yeah. There's lots of different definitions of slavery. My dad was a slave of the Nazis, literally, and he escaped. You know, everyone's a slave. Everyone's a slave. You know, it's not just certain people in America who are slaves. Everyone is a slave of one sort or another. Although some obviously worse than others. Yeah. So Sherman says, sorry, it's my mission. Simple message, love you, Charles. Ooh. Pottinger's Human says, if you try to build a house today without a water or electric hookup, it's jail time. Captain Chaos says, dang, I'm late. That's okay. You can rewind, watch later. We've covered a lot of interesting things. Simple Man says, Pottinger's Human, true. It's a shame. Tasmaniac says, Stephen Evan are great people. That's Stephen Evan Strong. Captain Chaos says, howdy. Pottinger says, my grandfather built 7 homes when he was younger. If he did it today like that, they would be condemned, even though people live in them today. Yeah, it's a shame. There's so much bureaucracy and corruption, and you know, they have to build homes a certain way these days. Here, they have to have double glass. They have to have all this stuff, or they have to have solar panels or something like, you know. They've gone overboard, and government, there needs to be revolutions literally everywhere to get rid of these governments. Nobody says the Ignis Fatuus or Will of the Wisp. Todd says, sorry, dude, I'm just not getting notifications. Nobody Important says, or Jack-o'-lantern. Simple Man says, Vatican Archives. Captain Chaos says, I think Nan Madol, that's a thing made of basaltic extrusions, is the site for H.P. Lovecraft's story, Call of Cthulhu. I agree with you, yeah. Pottinger's Human says, that story is so funny. It's like someone turns around and sees Cthulhu, and then he instantly goes mad and starts raving, like, you know. Pottinger says, if Lovecraft translated it, that is Mein Kampf, he would have gotten paid and not have died young. Should have done it for that reason alone. Then we would have had 10 times as much Lovecraft to read. Yeah. I mean, I've read all of Lovecraft, and I imagine you have as well. It's such a fascinating, he's such a, you know what, and he's not even a good writer. It's hard to read, but it just gives you an adrenaline rush that no other author can give you. It's incredible. Yeah. Nobody important says Vatican archons rule the archives. I didn't know an archon was in control of an archive, but that's actually you've made a very good match there. Another match that I've come up with lately is megalith. What's the opposite of a megalith? Megalith means large stone. The opposite of megalith is a microlith. But if you look up microlith, it actually means something that big or smaller, a little piece of flint. But in Greek, micro simply means small. So what's going on? There is no word for a regular sized stone circle. And so you can't call it a regular sized stone circle a microlith. But I will. I'm going to do that in future publications. So can you call it, therefore, a mesolith, which would be a middle stone circle? No, because the Mesolithic era is the middle Stone Age. So there's no conformity in archaeology. Every term it's like in geology. Every term is different, comes from elsewhere, and invented by different people. And right. Shermanator says the Vatican hid tunnels in Cuzco. We're so far behind. Even with only 50 people online, so far behind. Tunnels for Cuzco for 400 years until the 50s. Nobody says HP was known as an introverted bigot. He kind of was. Ricky Spence says, I have personal contacts in Egypt if you ever go. Amazing place. Thank you, Ricky. I'll announce before I do, if I ever do. Von der Loo says, yep, feudalism law. Todd says, you read more comments than anyone, dude. Really? I never watched anyone else live, so I don't know. Man says, we're free to walk away, that's why. Curtis says, preach. Nobody says, what about the Basque? Everyone forgets about the Basque. Jenny says, nobody voted them in. Fakers. We're talking about the corporations. Yeah, why are there trillion-dollar corporations controlling everything and no one voted them in? And that's called a democracy. It never was a democracy, and certainly that isn't a democracy either, don't you think? Like, wow. Pottinger says, yes, freedom equals freedom from the government control. They just run roughshod over the whole planet, and the politicians get elected on their dime. Nobody important says cattle generally aren't aware they are not free. Yeah, okay, that's a really good point there. Simple Man says, I think it was a ritual with all the specific items and objects, but I don't know. Nobody important says free dumb in the modern age. Von der Loo says 50% of Americans didn't believe our votes counted 16 years ago. Are you talking about the Bush and who was it? I can't remember. It was the climate change guy, wasn't it? Yeah. Jenny says correct. Multman says, will you please do another video about alchemy symbols? I think I've done alchemy for now, but maybe it'll pop up in future. Ricky says the Star of Bethlehem lasted over a year. Not possible that the Jupiter-Saturn alignment is a star. It has lasted a long time. And the reason is this is called a greatest conjunction. It just keeps going. And thank you for your generosity. It just keeps going all year. It keeps bunching together 3 times a year or more. Means it's called a triple conjunction. You can look up triple conjunction and it'll explain it. This is all ill-defined. Modern people do not understand this. The terminology is confusing. For example, the sky is divided into 4 trigons. Yeah, 4 trigons. You would think there would be 3 trigons, but there are 4 trigons, and fire, earth, water, air, and defined by 3 different constellations in each. And when it popped into the when the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction popped into the fiery trigon in the 1600s, they assumed the world would burn down, and then nothing happened. And they said, oh, it was fake. And then London burned down. So something happened. Witches were being burned. It was a hard time, just like today. It was a hard time. We've entered hard times, you know. The modern minimum, we've entered that. And yeah, that's what's happening. That's what's happening. So, you know, this is the worst thing in astrology is happening now. It means It means king will be overthrown, replaced by a new king. Overthrown. Look what's just happened. Am I allowed to say that? Will I insult anyone? But lots of people believe that has just happened. I'll say no more. And that's why Herod killed the babies. And now it's just happened. The Star of Bethlehem, you see. People going nuts, absolutely nuts all around the world. Thank you so much, Jim James. Yeah. So what else? Yeah, nobody important says laws of men or laws of the creator, choose one. Todd says, thank you, you're the coolest. Pottinger's Human says, none of those rules are bad for the corporations or banks, though. Nobody important says, sorry, everyone, those regular stones will just not do. Nobody says, everyone, darn, but look at all these regular stones. Shermanator says, these are fun chats. Timmy Gore. Jim says, love the channel, much appreciated. Austin says, not sure if you have mentioned the Budge Bim eel trap system in southwest Victoria, 6,600 years old. People lived in the settlements for thousands of years. And you're correct. This is what, I didn't mention it, but that's what this guy talks about, Bruce Pascoe. There was another guy, Ken Saunders, in 2003, an Aboriginal, talking about those fish traps. And they did indeed have agriculture. There was an agriculture, you know what? There were agricultural Aborigines who might have been descended from the megalith building Aborigines, and they were continuously at war with hunter-gatherer Aborigines until Europeans arrived. Nobody says, check out the Aranaka for rituals. Aranakas are in the Vedas. Captain Chaos says, what's everybody's favourite Lovecraft story? Azathoth would like to know. You want to know mine? It's Mountains of Madness, because it's so, I won't give away the plot, but the plot turns in on itself. The plot turns in on itself. It's as they think they're conducting a scientific expedition. Little do they know that ... Yeah, that's a good one. Horror Red Hook is such a good one. It's hilarious, but I had to throw it down. I actually threw it down on the ground because I got sick of it, because he seems to hate certain types of humanity, and I really don't I myself don't. I'm not a greenie or anything, but it was too much even for me. Oh my goodness! But I read it. It was great, a great read. Anyway, Rodney says, "Hey Charlie, is the Great Conjunction the beginning of the Age of Aquarius?" This thing has been so overblown. Where in ancient history does it ever talk about the Age of Aquarius, the Age of Leo, and all this? I've never seen this in an ancient astrological document. This is some kind of New Age stuff. This is driven by the fact that the Sphinx pointed to Taurus at one time, then it pointed to the Ram before that, or the Ram after that, after the Age of Taurus. And the Age of Taurus around 5000 BC would correspond to when people were, in fact, worshipping the bull. But I think it's totally overblown. And in the 1960s, they said, oh, well, if you read books in the 60s, they said, we're soon entering the Age of Aquarius, and the future is going to be amazing. And actually, the future was in the 60s and the 80s, because 1960 and 1990 were the top of civilization, because they were the peaks of sunspot activity, if you look it up. And since then, it's declined. So that the future was then, not now. And look, for me, all the best songs were in 1990. The best movies were around 1990. You know, that was the peak. It's declined. I mean, how can you argue that it hasn't declined? Yeah, right. So Shermanator said, all things good says, is the earth round or flat? I don't know. Maybe, of course I know. Okay. Shermanator says, stalactites at Tiwanaku are 12,000-year-old man-made conduits. Shermanator says, miles and miles of gardens south of Titicaca. Oh, where did it go? Yeah, so Multman says, do all cultures mention a great flood and giants? Captain Chaos says, lol. Ricky Spencer's favourite Lovecraft book is Shadow Out of Time. Wow. Honestly, what a genius title that is. Like, wow. Nobody important says Titicaca is an anomaly in and of itself. So you're saying that lake in the mountains next to Tiwanaku, 20 kilometers from Titicaca, is an anomaly. And that's the thing. They say, how come Tiwanaku has a port and it's not on Lake Titicaca, which is 20 kilometers away? And then they say, because like, how would they have gotten their fish? Obviously, the lake must have been bigger, or there's been an upheaval, as Mr. Poznansky and one of his disciples. He had disciples in the 30s and 40s. He had two disciples who wrote books. And people don't know about these guys. One guy called Bellamy, he wrote a book called Before the Flood, which I have yet to read. Anyway, yeah. Check out this place in the Badlands Guardian in Walsh, Alberta, Canada. You're saying Canada has an ancient ruin? I don't believe you. That's going to be hard to prove. But Canada seems to be very destitute of ancient ruins, Sir Sean. But you say a face emerges from the landscape when seen from the air. Interesting. But you do have the Ogopogo monster, don't you? Yeah, I'd love to see that. Okay. Ricky says astrologers have been around as long as humans. Exactly. Astrologers built Stonehenge, and they need to use astrology to find out how Stonehenge works. Timmy says the 1980s. You reckon that's the peak? Nobody important says Great Reset. No. Well, exactly. Actually, the 1980s and the 1970s and 80s are halfway between the two solar maxima. So they were kind of the peaks. So nobody important says Great Reset. No. Great Mutation Cycle. Sure. Pump faking that they are in control of it somehow. Bollocks. Von der Loo says, does Taurus have anything to do with the phrase BS? I don't know. All Things Good says, is the Earth round or flat? Captain Chaos says, do you know about crustal displacement, Charles Hapgood? There's a lot of good things about his theories, yeah. Jenny says, I heard they unearthed a Jewish synagogue that was dedicated to astrology. So now people are saying, not against the rules, just that you aren't allowed to worship anything else than God, including stars. Austin says Titicaca was much larger. Well, there goes Poznansky's theory, I guess. Shermanator says locks and canals. Rodney says, thanks for the answer. By the way, have you ever heard of sidereal astrology? And is that more accurate than tropical or Western astrology? So the difference between sidereal and tropical is the way you measure. Do you measure from the basis of whether it's observed, or do you measure from the basis of actual? But I sort of forget the difference. But yeah, it's an interesting point you make, and I don't really know the answer. Ed Hornery says, have you ever heard of the theory that all great megaliths were constructed in the age of Aries? The civilization that built them were called Aryans. Not really. Nobody important says Titicaca was salt water in an ancient age. Multiman says, Charles, what's the most exciting discovery? Look, every time I go exploring, I'm making discoveries, honestly. I'm tripping over things, and everything's exciting. But probably the most exciting is the fact that the causeways of the pyramids actually point to Coptic festivals. Like, no one talks about this. I asked some experts on pyramids if anyone has come up with this before, and they said no, they've never seen it before, because archaeologists don't bother with astronomy software. They don't have a clue about what astronomy is. Do they even know that the Earth goes around the sun? Honestly, I mean, Sherlock Holmes didn't even know that. Why would an archaeologist know that? Right. So Curtis says, shout out Alberta. Jenny says, but the esoteric people talk about Jesus being a magician. Google Jesus magic wand. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn does streams on Jesus magic. Bruce Codex was found in Egypt. Secret teachings. Timmy says, north of Portugal has old Celtic ruins similar to the Cloud people in Peru. Sherman says, Andean history matters. And Sherman is very he he posts a great deal of stuff on Twitter, stuff in different languages that no one understands. And yeah, he's very interested. He's very interested in these things. Acid says all cultures knew Earth was a stationary plane. Graham says hello from Kansas City. Hello. Ricky says you were still in diapers in the 80s, Chuckles. Yeah, I was. Timmy says it's a square. I play Minecraft. Another dork says, I hope you're all well. Ricky says Moses had a magic staff as well. Jenny Simon says, I think everyone is worshipping the same gods by different names. I think the Mormons are onto something about the Tower of Babel, making us think the stories were separate via language. Nobody important. Oh, it scrolled again. It says it's spelled synagogue in Israel. Emu Cat says it's an old Knights Hospitalier temple a few miles away. The field next to it still has medicinal plants pop up. Acid clarifies sidereal for us. He says it's the exact time it tails for the sun's motions. Victor says, Charles, do you know anything about the labyrinth of Egypt? Not really. But it seems to be... okay, here's the problem. Here's what I think's happening. Guy, I believe it was Lepsius or some other German, contacted the Kaiser by telegram and said, I found the labyrinth. And the Kaiser said, wonderful. And they gave him all these medals and adulations and all this. But he didn't find anything. There's nothing there. He thought he found it because he thinks there was a pyramid there with a labyrinth in front of it, which was the tombs and chambers and all that. But there's nothing there. Eric von Daniken visited it by taxi. The taxi driver told him, don't bother, there's nothing there. And he said, I want to see it. You can read this in Daniken's Eye of the Sphinx. He went there and he thought, oh, there's nothing here. So maybe the labyrinth is somewhere else or something else has happened because he thought the labyrinth would be ancient chambers carved by high technology. That's why he wanted to go. And by aliens or whatever, right? And or humans given alien technology. And so I think that's not the labyrinth because Herodotus said it's the best thing ever, but that's the location given by Herodotus. So I think what we consider as the Herodotus papers were edited by and scrambled. They're like a scrambled eggs. So the locations, the times, they're all different. And if you look at Herodotus, his view of Egyptian history, it's a scramble. He says, for example, that Khufu lived after Ramses. Khufu didn't live after Ramses. So he's putting Khufu around 1000 AD, 1000 BC, instead of 2400 BC, which everything tells us 2500, 2600 BC. You know, so there you go, people. Don't trust what Herodotus writes, but I don't think he's the father of lies. I think someone scrambled his works. That's why it's weird. Also, he said you had to be. He said there was sacred prostitution in Babylon, and people said, "What is this guy on? What drugs is he taking?" He said Khufu's daughter was a sacred prostitute, and they thought, "What drugs is this guy taking?" But there was, in fact, sacred prostitution. Even in ancient Rome, there was sacred prostitution. So why not in Babylon? Honestly, Pottinger says bright inside is boring. Ad says just came here from the Bright Insight live stream. I'll have to watch his live stream later, actually. Gramp says, how do you feel about the recent UFO footage the governments have been releasing? I haven't seen it. Nobody says Joseph Smith had a brother. Hiram was his name. Von Daniken thinks that Joseph Smith's, let's grab some coffee. He thinks Joseph Smith's work is actually a UFO story. And he was abducted or something, and he was abducted, and that was a UFO story. Yeah. By the way, I'm starting to lose weight. I've stopped all grains. I'm going to be skinny. I used to be quite skinny. Like 5 years ago, I was like a stick, and I got heavy on this lockdown. So I've cut out all grains. If you cut out all grains, all the addiction vanishes, and it's like a drug, and then you can lose weight. So I've just done that, and yeah, just for the sake of telling you guys. So Jenny says, yes, Aaron and his rods of God, and Moses and his staff, Solomon and his demons building his temples. Yeah, it's high technology, isn't it? And then you add to that the Shamir of Solomon. You add to that the fact that what happened was the queen of the Shamir of Solomon, it's kind of laser or mirror, used to carve stones. You add to that from the Kebra Nagast, the Ethiopian book, that Queen of Sheba actually stole the Ark from Solomon, took it back to Ethiopia. The Jews chased after them, and but the Queen of Sheba, she stole it, and or what happened was her men stole it, and she didn't really prove. Something from memory, something like that happened, and she didn't go through Egypt to get to Ethiopia. She flew over Egypt to get to Ethiopia. So the entire Solomon story is filled with high technology. Shermanator says staff gods are an Andean myth and a British myth as well. I have to say. Roxy Rock says we will never surrender. Chixato says, what are your thoughts on Robert Sheppard's work? I think it's pretty good work. Yeah, it's pretty. He just reports. He just reports information. He comes up with some good theories. And by the way, I know he watches some of my videos as well. I can tell. So Wild Turkey says, any info on the Gosford? I have nothing new. I'm sorry, but just to ask Stephen Evans Strong. I'll talk endlessly about it. Pottinger's Human. I've never been there. Pottinger's Human says, I can hear a plane in the sky. Do you know how rare that is to have a plane in the sky? Oh my goodness. Since we're back to the Stone Ages. Pottinger's Human says, everyone worships money today. If you have no principles, you will become nothing in the end. Quite a low flying plane. Nobody says Joseph and Hiram knew the Zohar very well. It sounds like something that Christopher Knight and Robert Lomas would write about, actually. Curtis says, Sheppard is my G. Interesting. Is your what? What does G mean? Okay. All right. Milton says, any history about Sasquatch in the 1600s? Shermanator says, thanks, Charles. It's all good. Pottinger says, in the Bennington Triangle, what's that? They had a Bigfoot sites in the 1700s, and also people talked about rocks that ate people. And people being suddenly called by the mountain and running off and disappearing. That's exactly the same as a novel we have, Picnic at Hanging Rock. We have a very strange location with massive monolithic pillars, natural pillars. And but it almost looks like a lost civilization, I gotta say. It's weird. And there's a story about girls who they hear voices and they stay there forever and they disappear. And then the school teacher goes to look for them and they disappear too. But it's fiction. But it's presented in the movie as if it happened. And the audience is wondering, is this real? And you're mentioning the same thing as well. Mountains everywhere are associated with these geomagnetic phenomena which tend to scramble our brains. Yeah. And someone found me because you're saying I'm a continuation of Robert Sheppard. So Ricky Spence says, I needed commandeer a few to build me a temple. Best I can come up with is some Indonesians with sticks on YouTube. Jenny says, I love Robert Sheppard. He's great too. Victor says, all three Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, have the same God and share a sacred book, the Old Testament, and a common origin, the ancient Mesopotamian religion. Acid Cube says, dude, you're looking well. Who, me? Thanks. Pottinger's Human says, grains are horrible for the health. Good job. Eggs are the super. Eggs are a superfood. Anything that can nourish a baby, like an egg, must be a superfood. So there would be some superfood in milk, I guess. There would be some superfood in eggs, and there's some superfood, obviously, in seeds, which are unfortunately, I guess, grains. Some superfood in nuts, and some superfood in berries. The woman the longest-lived woman, she's only one of them, but she drank Pinot Noir every day, the French woman. Cold climate Pinot Noir, which is full of things to nourish and preserve the berry in a cold climate. So she was living 40 years longer than, or 20 or 40 years longer than she should have lived. And she knew Van Gogh. She met Van Gogh, I believe, as a child. She lived so long because she was being nourished The DNA in the plants and humans are the same. The DNA being preserved in the. Oh, yeah, whatever. Right. Okay. So Todd says, I'm having a bit of vodka. Cheers, mate. I'm having a bit of coffee. So Ricky Spence says, if grain disappears, so does the booze. Chuckle. I've stopped the booze as well because it's sort of. I was getting a rash actually on my arms for quite a long time. As soon as I stopped that, it went away, and it's kind of stayed away. So yeah. Oh, thanks. Someone's been very generous to me. Thank you so much. So Curtis says, good for you. I eat the rice wraps. They're good if you warm them up a bit. Chicato 710 says there's a lot of evidence that the Bolivian plateau is Atlantis. I read a book on that, actually. There's an American who came up with that theory. And you're probably talking about that same guy. And you say, and the Indians have legends that kind of point it there too. Then Forster's DNA test shows the skulls are from the Black Sea region. I bet they're from other places as well as Black Sea. I bet they're also found in ancient UK. But you see, which is the home of the redhead. But you see, the thing is that Black Sea region in ancient times, even as little as 1,000 years ago, was a home of redhead people. And Arab chroniclers say all the Russians are redheaded, ruddy people. They are ruddy. The Rus are ruddy. They are ruddy. They are red-headed people, and they got red. I got a bit red. I got a red beard. It doesn't look red, but if it gets longer, it turns red. And in fact, most Europeans probably have the same phenomenon happening. All the Russians have had red hair. The ones who mixed with Iranians, then the Slavs mixed with Iranians in historical memory, and in Ukraine they're mixed with Greeks and Tatars, and obviously Mongols and Chinese, and as a result, modern Russians have darker hair. They're no longer so red-headed as they were. Okay, so Curtis says, good for you. I eat the rice. Okay. Thank you, Sherman Osborne. Very, very generous indeed. Thank you, sir. So Jenny says, everyone watch a short video on mute called Making Pure Synthetic Quartz. I think of the quartz crystal skulls. Melt quartz into a big shiny block in size of a head. High technology we make for electronics. I'm going to do that. Andrew Cross was doing that in the early 1900s with a voltaic pile. He was generating quartz crystals over time. It took him a year or two to grow a large quartz crystal. I'm going to do that from the Blue Moon channel, but I have to get my laboratory in order. It's stuff. I have to fix a table that started warping. I built 4 tables over it last summer, and one of them is warping. I've got some more wood to reinforce it now, and it's such a hassle. Donnie says, just left Jimmy, so glad to find you, Charles. Hello, Donnie. Jimmy's I got to say, Jimmy's a very nice guy. Like, he's been very friendly towards me, and I believe he watches some of my videos. So Pottinger wants to be put into a quartz monolith when he dies. Acid says, have you ever investigated John Searle? Never heard of him. Ulnar Lycurgus says, Washington State, USA has Sasquatch as an endangered species. The Forestry Department manuals display this. Well, they would know. So when I was in Tasmania, I saw a black Tasmanian tiger. It was basically a black marsupial. It looked like a black dog. And it had a marsupial has think of a marsupial as a feminine-looking mammal. I say feminine because small, slender waist, elongated, and big hips, and that's what a marsupial resembles. Almost at times rounded or rat-like, and that's what a marsupial is. And the thing about these creatures is that so what I saw was a marsupial because it fit this description. Was it the marsupial tiger that was last seen in 1930? And I saw in the rearview mirror a black dog. I was hunted for the camp, but of a marsupial shape. It was not no dog, and it was in a forest. I turned around, take the photo. It's gone. Damn. I told the park ranger this. He said,
it could be a new species that you've discovered. And he was all about protecting and he would know. Wouldn't he know? I told someone in a Victorian cryptid society this, and he told me it's unlikely because Tasmania is a small island, so it's unlikely. And he told me, but I'm going to go there and have a look next week. Really? You're going to go there and have a look? Okay. So, you know what I mean? So there are cryptids, there are cryptids out there that you can see. So why wouldn't they? So good on you for saying that and for them acknowledging that as well. Oops. Yeah. So Ricky says Genghis Khan had red hair. Yeah, red hair seems to come out of Asia, the Proto-Chinese and the Black Sea people, but of course the Englanders and the Irish as well, the redheads. So there was a redoubt of redheaded people in ancient UK. And these redheads, I've got to say, they're geniuses. Have you ever met a stupid redheaded person? It's not possible. They're all highly intelligent. They were the ancient masters back in the day, and possibly the coneheads as well. Yeah. See, someone mentions blondes. So blondes are also very intelligent, and they're coneheads too. You said the blonde ladies from Sweden have enormous heads. But a characteristic of blondes is they have an African type body, an African grace about them. The way they walk, it's graceful, that many redheads don't necessarily share. Redheads, I don't want to insult anyone, tend to waddle a little bit. And blondes, although they're very, very intelligent, they say naive, cutesy kind of things. They say that I was one that I knew. There was a fan on the ceiling, right? And there was a button. So the fan's spinning, and there was a button there on the stem of the fan. And she said, she said, "Oh, I wonder what. Oh, maybe that's how to switch the fan on. Oh, I'm gonna press it." And I said, "Well, how would you switch it off?" And you know what I mean? I don't press it. How would you switch it off? And she's like, "Oh." So they say some interesting naive things, I gotta say. Anyway, so that's where the stupid blonde, the dumb blonde thing came from. But of course, they're not dumb at all. They very rarely are. They're quite intelligent. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. What are we talking about? So you're saying that the redheads and the blondes came from the center of the earth. Jenny says, I'm naturally blonde. That's why I saw that while I was talking. I became very cognizant not to insult anyone. So you say that green, Basque-looking green eyes and a dark green ring. Both very, very rare. My grandmother was French. I colored my hair strawberry copper blonde. Dad's colored too. Yeah, Josh says, hi, Charles. Pottinger's Human says, I have them too, by the way. Luke says, my man. Nobody Important says, Anatolian peoples. Actually, since the Jimmy stream ended, there's more people tuning in here. There's like 20 more people. So Nobody Important says, Anatolian peoples built the pyramids. Jenny says, my real hair color on my video. I need to take new pictures, but haven't had a haircut since January. Gonna order some hair extensions to get through. Yeah. Donnie says, you're so much a very deep thinker, Charles. I love you so much. Thank you, Donnie. Ad says, I'm an anthropologist and I also happen to be a Muslim, Charles. I would be interested in your interpretation of Islamic texts and how they inform our history, e.g. Quran, works of Al-Ghazali, Ibn Kathir. So I don't know those latter two. As for the Quran, I've actually got it here. So I just finished reading it a few months ago, and I've got lots of footnotes and stuff. And one thing I spoke to an Islamic friend, he's not a friend anymore, but a former friend, and I said, who is the messenger? The Quran talks about the messenger. Who is the messenger? And I think the messenger is Jesus in some points, but it's never mentioned or rarely mentioned. In another point, it says, and Muhammad is the messenger. In other points, it seems Moses or other people are the messenger. So there are lots of messengers, and he told me, well, there are lots of messengers. And it seems to me the book is highly edited, and I mean that in the best possible way, of course. but it is highly edited, and it's historically acknowledged that it is edited. I believe some things have been removed from the Quran, which was seen as not consistent, and replaced with repetitive phrases, because, as you know, the Quran is highly, highly repetitive with certain phrases. Why is that so? And I believe they needed to keep it at 6,600 verses, and in order to do so, they couldn't just invent something, so they took a phrase from elsewhere and they repeated it where they wanted to remove a phrase. And we know that it was edited by proto-Saudis back in the day, and it seems to have changed over time. One thing I've noticed in here is very interesting is they seem to mention, look at this. Khufu seems to be mentioned because it says, truly Pharaoh elated himself in the land and broke up its people into sections. So we know that Khufu actually ordered everyone to the pyramids to build the pyramid, depressing a small group among them, probably the Jews, but it doesn't seem to mention the Jews. Their sons he slew, but he kept alive their females, for he was indeed a maker of mischief. So this isn't in the Old Testament, but it's in the Quran. And we wished to be gracious to those who were being depressed in the land, to make them leaders in faith and make them heirs, to establish a firm place for them in the land, and to show Pharaoh Haman. So Haman, Pharaoh Haman. Haman has got to be Hemiunu, the architect of the Great Pyramid. So he was a member of Khufu's family, so that means Pharaoh is Khufu, and their hosts at their hands the very things against which they were taking precautions. So here's the thing. Although we have Muhammad as a prophet, Muhammad makes a late entry into the Quran. You don't see him until later on mentioned. Why is that? In addition, and I'm not saying Muhammad didn't write it, or obviously he did, the first book sounds like St. Paul's work. You know, I'm not saying anything wrong. The first two books sound like early Christians, but a continuation of Christianity. It's very peace-loving, very peaceful, very nice. I also notice there are lots of pyramid mentions, but without mentioning the pyramid. For example, it says things like, you will have a resting place in paradise with rivers and gardens. Rivers and gardens are what the Chinese placed under their pyramids. Or you will have mansions, and there will be rivers and gardens. It sounds like underground tombs. So there is a great history contained within the Quran, which goes back a long way, back to the Stone Ages. Even the number, the 6,600 verses, it's base 6. It's a Sumerian tradition that's been continued. So that's what I think of the Quran. So what do you think about what I think? As a Muslim, what do you say to that? What do you think? Let me know. So anyway, there we go. Okay, so and there's so much history in there, yeah. Even if it has been edited. But anyway, yeah. So yeah. So where are we up to? Okay, so Ricky says, always let people underestimate you. It's an advantage. Yeah, like Columbo. Yeah. So nobody says, Salman al-Farsi is my hero. Who's that? Sean says, YouTube has shadow banned for sure, mate. Unfortunately, you never get suggested in my feed anymore, even though I'm a subscriber. Yeah, I have been shadow banned. For the last 2 years, I'm shadow banned. My subscribers are going backwards. I was getting, if you look at my early videos, they have hundreds of thousands of views. I seem to have ripped off a scab. My early videos have hundreds of thousands of views. Hundreds of thousands of views. My later videos, I got 1,000 or 2,000. Right? When I had 3,000 subscribers, I was getting more views than when I have 47,000 subscribers. Does that make any mathematical sense whatsoever if I'm not shadow banned? Of course it doesn't. Like, I have to. Yeah. Anyway, just to pull off a scab or something. Just anyway. So Jenny says, similar pear-shaped body type to Akhenaten with big hips. Yeah. Marsupials look like Akhenaten. Akhenaten is a marsupial. Nobody says Cro-Magnon traits, red or blonde hair with blue or green eyes and elongated skulls with a bit larger brains. Nobody important says story of Princess Scotta. Donnie says, I met a blonde a few years ago that couldn't figure out how to roll the window down, so I told her just take the knob and turn it. Yeah, this is the thing about blondes. They're extremely smart. They possess libraries. They read endlessly, but they just keep saying naive things, which is so fascinating. Or they keep thinking naive things. They're very innocent. You know what? They're innocent people. They're innocent, and people take advantage, Yeah, it's true. Anyway. But they are very clever. Pottinger says, I had someone measure my skull after seeing there are different types, and my measurements are almost exactly the same as the Cro-Mag skull. Nobody important says, caught one using a whiteout on my computer screen. Oh dear. Jenny says, my mother used to cut my hair short, stacked in the back, shaved a bit, told me I have the most beautiful skull, also told me there is something about my birth chart. Mum met Dad in daycare as toddlers. Wow, it's a long relationship. Pottinger says, my head is way bigger than normal people, but that makes sense as I am tall and have a big frame. You're a giant, mate. Pottinger says, well, it's amazing, met so young, very lucky. Jenny says, isn't that bizarre? Dad's parents were probably Nazis, actually. They fled World War II Germany after Grandma caught Grandpa strangling my father in the crib. I don't know. Did they change their name? Interesting. Shermanator says, I had to locate all my YouTube resources pretty much on my own. Been a great learning experience. Nobody important says the Quran was treated as the same as the King James version vernacular. It's a tragic shame. And yeah. Tragic shame. Where were we? So Jenny says, Grandma supposedly remarried when my father was an infant before coming to America. My real last family name crest looks like a wand from a tarot card, a stick basically. And you also say Simon was a magician. Danny says, wow. Nobody says Muhammad would have agreed with the Sufi way of worship since Mohammedans aren't heard from today. Curtis says Charles is underground. Pottinger says strangling in the crib. Wow, my great uncle fought for Germany in World War I until he got an injured hand after 3 years fighting. It looked just like Otto Skorzeny. Wow. Skorzeny being a very distinguished soldier of World War II, enhancing his own reputation with his autobiography, and he became very famous. Jenny says, but he was also a hero in World War II. Jenny says, I had someone on my chart recently that told me I was born on an eclipse. What does that mean? My mother talks about still working on my birth chart. Why? I don't know, but what you can do, Jenny, you can actually dial your birth chart into online horoscopes and get an instant reading, and it'll tell you everything. It'll tell you about what that eclipse means. Shermanator says, yep, YouTube screws alternate researchers over. It's true. We've all been screwed. Ancient Architect says he's noticed, I think he said he's noticed his views gone down about a third or something. Look, honestly, if YouTube hadn't screwed me, I'd be at 1 million subscribers. I'd seriously be at 1 million subscribers because it was growing so fast. And then they screwed me, and they only show it to existing people and just a few other people, And meanwhile, all the oldest subscribers, they unsubscribe them. And so occasionally there's a package of like a few hundred unsubscribed, and no one else is getting subscribed. So my subs are down 700 on what they were 2 years ago. Does that make any sense in the world? If people like my videos and they watch them, like why would that be happening? So nobody important says Muhammad had one non-Muslim friend of record, Salman the Persian Al-Farsi. Donnie says, what about the Magi and Jesus, Charles? Don't know, but I read the other day that Magi was the name of a priest in Japan. They were called a Magi. Victor says the Quran was revealed to Muhammad by God through the messenger Archangel Gabriel, which is the messenger of God in all three Abrahamic religions. The first half of the Quran equals same as the Old Testament. Giant Secret says Akhenaten's body shape was created to emulate the lion's body shape. Pottinger says everyone used to do astrology. Witch hats and cooking and cauldrons used to be the norm for most of Europe. My great-grandmother was over 6 foot, red hair, cooked in a cauldron, wore a witch's hat. Oh, my goodness. But yeah, you're right. The witch's hat. If you look up the witch's hat and stuff on YouTube, you'll see it was a fashion. It was a fashion trend in the 1600s. Yeah, during that time when they were burning the witches, they wore the witches' hats literally, and they wore it in deeply ancient times in China and Europe. It goes back all the way. Austin says, just got a text message from my wife. Got bored, have done some baking. Treat waiting for you when you get home. Yay. I hope it's a really nice treat that you have there waiting for you. Jenny says, where's Jenny? Jenny says, Gabrielle talks to me a lot because I pray over my rods that I want to talk to God or my angel. Interesting. Danny says, all in the algorithms, my friend. Nobody says, Sadducee has made minor adjustments in the Book of Remembrance. Shh. Poser Bob says, do cloth masks prevent cryptosporidium? Todd says, hey, Text, hello, but I didn't see him. He's not here. A general says, promotional content feed agenda. Yeah, you're right. So YouTube is currently they want to be like, they want to replace every cable channel around the world with themselves. So they're promoting everything mainstream first. So I can't even find my own videos. I search for my name and I type Serpent Mound, and it doesn't find the video of me at the Serpent Mound from 2017. It's not there. So I mean, it's not a search engine. It's not a search. It's a promotion. It's a big business. It's not YouTube. It's ThemTube. They should change the name to ThemTube, and then it would, and yeah, like, you know what, I was making, honestly, you know what I was making? I was making like $2,000 a month on the good months from this channel, and now it's like 200 a month. So if it's gone down to 10% of what it was, how is that not a kind of shadow banning? You know what I mean? So I mean, there you go. You know, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. So Pottinger's Human says, don't care what people want to see. Pendle says people are leaving YouTube. Ak, you've gotten back to me about what I've just been talking about my interpretation of the Quran. Honestly, it's very simple, I got to tell you, because it's belief. You got to believe. And then it says, it says quite often, if you don't believe, you're going to hell. Don't believe, you're going to hell. Again and again and again. That is an extension of what St. Paul was saying. All you have to do is believe and you'll go to heaven. So you can see how it evolved. And there were St. Paul Christians were basically early Muslims. So, and you're saying, appreciate your insight into the Quran. I realize it can be an inflammatory topic, but we stand more chance of unlocking the secrets if we analyze different perspectives. Awesome. And you also say beyond the dogma that mainstream religion tries to restrict it with. Yeah. Awesome. Good. Glad you liked it. So, yeah. So, Ricky says witches were the healers and herbalists, the wise women. Maltzman says Steven Spielberg directed the first non-pilot episode of Columbo. Yeah, the first TV episode was the non-movie episode. It was interesting. That's my favorite Columbo. And the other awesome one is the first Columbo movie with that guy Gene Barry in it. The actor Gene Barry, not the Gene Barry from The Birds, who is like, you know, he was in a few other adventure movies as well. That they use him in adventure movies, kind of sort of adventure detective movies, just for a few of them. And that movie is really good. It's really interesting. It's such a twist at the end. So check out that movie. I believe it's 1968, and Columbo is actually handsome looking and dressed very well, which is not typical of Columbo. Later on, they turned him into trash, unfortunately. But he's dressed very well. He's got a suit and tie. He's looking good. He looks a bit like Bond, you know, in that movie. Anyway, yeah. Right. So Sherman says trophy skulls never go out of never go out of style. Pottinger says if you're born under an eclipse, Jenny, you must have an amazing astrology report. Maltman says the Karen witches were burned. Probably. There was actually a great, there was a really funny episode of Midsummer Murders, which is a British show they show in Australia. Basically, it's full of middle and old-aged characters, and everyone in the village dies eventually, but you don't quite know where it's located. It must be, it's a town somewhere in the Midlands of England, and in this village, someone's investigating the burning of a witch. And a school teacher is saying they inappropriately burned witches. And then the town is up in arms. And they start attacking the school teacher's house saying, they were witches. Why else would they have burned them? Yeah, our ancestors did the right thing. Yeah. So it's kind of a bit like some of those movies showing, like the one about the hobby horse and all that, showing the Wicker Man. It's kind of like the Wicker Man, And then what happens is, it's actually a woman killing people off who murdered her, and the school teacher, she's the victim, right? But she's actually the murderer because she's killing people off whose ancestors 400 years ago burned her ancestor, right? So somehow that makes sense, but there you go. That's the plot. So it's hilarious. I just thought I'd share that. But anyway, yeah. So, right. So, so Donnie says, supposedly the Welsh from England are descended from Iran, which would be Sumerians, but the ancient times they call themselves Cimmerians with a CRK. What's up with that? So the Welsh, here's the thing. So the Welsh, according to Baron Blackett and Alan Wilson, are partly from Babylon and Phoenicia under Albine, a guy called Albine, hence it's called Albion. And then after that, there was a second migration from the Trojan region, they claimed 500 BC, which was the Brutus migration. And other Trojans became Romans. So therefore, the Britons and the Romans, in the Republican days, were related. They had related monarchies. And that's their theory. So that's what I have to say on that. But I've got another theory, which I'll come up with in a few videos, showing that they are actually Minoans. Yeah, because they got the same black curly hair as the Berbers and the Minoans. But anyway, well, some of them do. So Jenny says, Pottinger says, if you're unhealthy due to bad diet and lots of insulin resistance, it could kill you. It can't kill someone healthy. Yeah. I've sort of had that all my life. Eat a bit of grain or sugar or whatever, and you just sort of crash out, and it just puts it up. You put on weight I put on weight quite easily. Yeah. You're saying that's why certain groups die off before they reach 60 naturally. You eat garbage and watch TV all day and never exercise. You're not going to live long, plain and simple. Curtis says you should build audiences elsewhere, that's other than YouTube, for when this tanker ship goes down, and it will go down. I mean, honestly, eventually YouTube's going to be made illegal, or they're going to charge a monopoly. They're going to realize they can charge them a monopoly tax of whatever the hell they want, and Google will have no choice but to pay. But for some reason that is not happening. They got a money windfall here, that they could get their hands on. I hope they do that and get rid of this system, to be honest, because it's they've treated me pretty badly compared to others, who they haven't. But there's a lot to be thankful for as well, and I do love YouTube still, even though they're doing this to me and to others. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, people. There are people out there. People just watch them because they're just idiots, and they get almost no likes, and their channels are growing, and mine's not. I mean, yeah. Why is the phone ringing? Let it ring. Doesn't matter. Just let it ring. Just let it ring. Let it ring. Let it ring. So nobody says Paul was a heretic. Poser Bob says, I live in Florida. People in suits live in Ohio. Yeah, you're right. I noticed that when we crossed from Michigan into Ohio, suddenly the trucks vanished, and everyone just had small cars, and they were more like white-collar business people. Yeah, you're right. Super fine. Right. some Indian. I said, you who? And he's like, sorry? Anyway, so Poser Bob says, I live in Florida. People in suits live in Ohio. Jenny says, yeah, I live on the coast 5 minutes from the Pacific in Ocean Shores, WA. Washington is that? Wonderful place. Deer ate out of my hand. You can see in my last video, the male ate out of my hand too. Accidentally cut off the video. Sounds awesome. Nobody says Saul was a member of the Pharisees. Pottinger's Human says, Paul just shows that the whole Christianity thing has roots going back much further than most believe. The area he was in was Celtic Phrygian area of Turkey. Midsummer murders. Someone is murdered every week. That village must have the world's highest homicide rate. Indeed. Yeah. It's interesting as well. I mean, everyone is the murderer in that show. Like, it can be a common person, and they pick on aristocrats as well. They can be aristocratic or rich people as well, kind of in a Columbo kind of way, doing the murdering. Yeah. Another dork says Brutus of Troy. Pottinger's Human says, wow, that must be nice. I used to live in Huntington Beach. It's still very nice, but back then in the 80s, you could just walk on the beach alone. Ricky says Washington is gorgeous. Cascades are rumbling and infilling with magma. Many of the quakes are going unreported. Stay safe. Yeah. Pottinger's Human says, look, honestly, yeah, with that phone call, honestly, if it's an overseas call center, if there's an Indian on one, an overseas call center, I'm just going to hang up. Or sometimes I tell them, don't call me again, and they actually didn't. So yeah, or I can block the number. I've got it's a traditional phone, but I've actually got a phone blocker, like a digital thing you can buy to just block the number. So I should have done that, but yeah. I mean, someone overseas doesn't need to be talking to me. That's honestly on that phone. Honestly. Ricky says most people are mindless drones that enjoy blather and escape. Yeah, so true, actually. Yeah. Ricky says teach them to call you Chuck. Another doc says the Brutus Stone in London is so small now. So what happened was when Brutus reached London with his migration, there were giants. So the Britons are dark-haired people, the Welsh, right? So they're from the Mediterranean, right? And when they reached Britain, they were told that look, you can go live in Britain. They were actually fleeing the Greeks. There were too many Greeks everywhere. And some Trojans flew to the opposite side of Italy where there were no Greeks living to found Rome. That's why Rome is away from the Greek side of Italy. You see, it's on the other side, right? And they were some of the Trojans. And other Trojans supposedly fled all the way to England. Some founded Gaul, also Trojan origin apparently. Some founded Britain, right? And when Brutus stepped onto shore, he stepped onto a rock, which is now the Brutus Stone, which was on a pavement in London and presumably still is. And people chipped away bits of it. And now saying it's very small, there's hardly anything left. It's all been chipped away. The reason it's been chipped away is in the old days, photography is very expensive, or there was no photography. So if you want a souvenir, you actually take the object. You take a bit of Pompeii. You chip away a bit of Stonehenge. 200 years ago, there was a guy at Stonehenge who would rent you a hammer so you could chip away a bit of Stonehenge and take it home with you. Robin Hood's grave was chipped away and is gone. But it wasn't even the original grave. Probably it was actually a replacement, because even that one was gone, right? And they replaced it, and the replacement was taken away as well. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. So yeah. Multiman says your phone sounds like it's from 1950. Well, it's from 1950, or it's from the 40s. It is. Yeah. Yeah. Donnie says I have a great insight, Charles. Thank you so much. This is a sort of going to be a pirate theme kind of lounge / office study, because I've got 2 bureaus in here. One of them is there, and one of them is here, and a desk, and just lounges, and the alcohol, and a few pictures on the walls and stuff. Anyway, yeah. So Roxy Rock says, I live near the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum and Temple. Jenny says, one of the only beaches you can still drive on is here. So awesome. Yeah, just built a 4-bay compost bin. Hugel cultured underneath, so nutrients don't leach. Raised beds next. I need good veggies. Pottinger's Human says, is Midsummer Murders the one where the dog seems to open the door? Philomena Crook had some hilarious stuff. I don't know if the dog opens the door. Look, what it is, it did have a very tired-looking police constable and his ignorant sidekick for a long time, and then that guy retired. Almost in the spirit of the earlier Inspector Morse. By the way, there's a very good Inspector Morse episode you can check out on YouTube. It's actually got Darth Vader in it, the Darth Vader voice, and the guy, and who seems to be an Englishman, I guess. And he says, metempsychosis, more reincarnation, and then he vanishes, and then some of those episodes are almost supernatural. And I used to watch that quite a lot in the 90s, and you can say it was a different world back then. It was so different in the 90s to today. Like, everything was different. Like, you wanted entertainment before, you put a record on, in the 90s, and now it's just YouTube, right? So there you go. Right. Okay. So someone said the phone was, I bet YouTube calling after hearing you complain. Pottinger says, oh man, now I can't call you then, Charles. Lol. Pottinger says, I enjoy Escape. You can call me on Facebook. I enjoy Escape. The stuff on the news is a nightmare. It is, isn't it? So that's a real nightmare. Jenny says, I am going to try winter quick compost with seaweed and leaves through the new Earthwise Chipper Shredder Mulcher. Love it. You got a lot of equipment there, Jenny. You're really in the sticks. You say, love that thing. Lol. Next door sold and cut down all the trees. Endless supply of wood chips. Rodney Thomas says, hey, Charles, why did the Sea Peoples not attack the Phoenician ports in the Levant? Yeah, that's a good point. Right, okay. These were impregnable. Alexander spent 3 years sieging Tyre, and he was so sick of the place that when he finally got it, he killed them all. Didn't he kill them all? So that is kind of why there is no ancient Phoenician history. We don't have any. If we did, we'd have world maps. Those people went everywhere, Stupid. See, Alexander is admired, but he was an awful monster. Honestly, he was a Hitler or a Stalin, literally. Yeah. So, Pottinger says, I used to grow grapevines and try to breed them. Farming is a lot of fun, but it was too much time and work. Not my time. But to grow a vine is like 7 years, so not too practical. Yeah, there's no need to. You can make what? Mate, you don't need grapes. You don't need to grow your own grapes to make wine. You can make your own. You can buy grapes. You can make wine from oranges. You can make wine from anything. You can make alcohol from anything that grows. You can make orange juice wine is actually pretty good. You can from fermented honey. You can make wine. It's medieval wine. Then it's even better. So you don't need grapes at all. You can make it from plum. The plum wines and plum brandies. Medieval again. Grapes are not necessary. Yeah, they're overrated. They're overdone. Everyone's doing it because the Romans did it. The French do it. They're overrated. Don't need them. Sure, they've got the complexity to them, but yeah. Yeah, so yeah. Milton says hello from Canada. Oh yeah. DT says it's bedtime here. Good night, folks. Good night, DT. Jenny says Hugel culture is a German way of planting on top of buried logs, soil and some greens to compost underneath and hold water if you are in sand. Will probably keep worms in too. Yeah, I've been going for 2 hours 38. Time flies. Oh my goodness. Pottinger says everything was better in the 90s. Now you are a criminal if you go outside. Oh, yeah. We had that here for 6 months, I think. You're a criminal if you go outside. Yeah, literally, almost. It was almost as bad as China, but they didn't really lock people inside houses. That was the only difference, Yeah. Yeah, this year's. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So Pottinger says, I used to grow plants inside and then use artificial light and sand and add in nutrients and plants. Amazing. Yeah. So Austin says, I made honey and mead for years and loved it. Apples and honey. Nobody important says, Phoenicians must have reeked of old snails. Ew. Pottinger says, my grandfather was a bootlegger for a while and also made his own wine. He just used whatever was in the garden. Chicato says, what about the underground city in Marble Canyon? Yeah. Multman says, what about fermented Roman garum? I never heard of that. Chris says, hey, Charles. Hey, Chris, how you doing? Donnie says, I don't doubt you one bit you are Welsh descendant. Ronnie Thomas says, thanks for the reply. And you are right. Historian Graham Phillips and Alexander was an alcoholic. No wonder he was so brave. Literally liquid courage. Nobody important says, thanks, Dr. K. You're a gentleman and a scholar, and there's a few of us left. Good day. Thank you, sir. So are you. Thank you, nobody. Another doc says, I really like hearing of British myths, history, etc. I've recently brought the Mabinogion. Mabinogion seems to me to be British tales surviving from at least Roman times, if not earlier. Even hints of Beaker Empire times, because it talks about things like the King of Gaul came over to marry this princess here in Britain, right? And you think, what the hell countries are they talking about? They're not talking about recent times. They're talking about ancient times before Roman. So it's as if you can see there are links. The King of Gaul, they all had these, you can see they were brotherly-like cultures on the Atlantic coast. So how far these stories go back, it's really interesting. Yeah. Rodney says, thanks for the reply, and you are right. Historian Graham Phillips said Alexander was an alcoholic. He was. No wonder he was so brave, literally liquid. Is that why? Because he was nuts because he ran into when he was sieging this place in India. Did he not? His men were afraid, and he said, "Come on, let's go." And then he got speared. He actually got speared, so he was wounded. Yeah, and so his men had no choice; they had to follow him. Yeah. Yeah. Chris says, "I really like the Druidic connections you made before." You know, I'm reading a book the biography of William Stuckley, whom I greatly admire, and I'm trying to do what he did in Australia with that. You know, that I've showed you earlier, Australia's Stonehenge, by that bloke, Richard Patterson, and but unfortunately, the guy is saying Stuckley was a lunatic. And he made travel itineraries, and then he actually went to live in the countryside because he wasn't selling enough books. He published all his travel books and itineraries and antiquities, and he made excellent pen and ink drawings, his genius drawings, which are a pleasure to behold. And but he became disgusted with London society, with people treating him with contempt. People saying he wasn't a proper antiquarian, that he was too fanciful. William Stuckley was kind of like we are. He was a New Ager, an ancient mystery person. So he became a druid, and he built a Stonehenge in his garden. His wife, he found a wife in the countryside. She had 2 miscarriages in a row. He did a weird ritual with the miscarriage fetus. He put it in his temple. He had a pagan temple. A few months after this ritual, he actually became a priest. Because he was a religious person, but he actually needed the money. He was only making £50 a year, he claimed, from his medical practice. People were claiming he didn't know anything about medicine. He was, however, of a gentlemanly origin, but he spent it all on his travels, etc. But earls and dukes would visit him, and he was in the Royal Society. And I'm reading a book about him by an author who won a Royal Medal of a gold medal in an archaeological society and so forth. And to win a gold medal in an archaeological society for having published a book, so you have to basically put down all the crazies. So he's saying William Stuckley turned into a lunatic. He was crazy. He was this. He was that. And I'm wondering, why did this idiot bother writing this biography in the first place? It's a very good biography, but why do you have to insult like that? And this is what archaeology does. They get personal with people. If one of them tried to get personal with me, I wouldn't allow that. They wouldn't dare. But I mean, why do they have to do this? Don't you reckon? Like, why do they do this for? But anyway, what are we talking about? Right. Yeah, so they're the Druidic connections. He was obsessed with the Druids. So Jenny says, I bought a bunch of food preservation equipment when COV-AIDS hit, dehydrator, food vacuum, food saver, vacuum sealer and jar attachments, pressure and water bath canner, might become a still for alcohol and essential oils. I'm going to do that too in my lab in the garage, do some essential oils. I want to make some perfumes. I want to do plasma experiments, so much stuff. It's ridiculous. I'm going to create planet Earths, miniature Earths inside fish tanks with plasma ball in the middle as the central sun, put different gases in there, create clouds. It's going to be amazing. That'll be on the Blue Moon channel, which I have a small channel, which is about 200 subscribers, Dan Republic says, hello, are there any megaliths near Canberra? Not that I know of, sir, but the area is mysterious. There is a ghostly lake monster in Canberra, in the lakes, in the lake there, in the Griffin Lake, which people have sometimes seen, which can't be because it's a new lake. So I don't know what's going on. And Multman's talking about garum. So you're talking about garum masala, are you, which is used in curries. He says it's a fermented fish sauce used as a condiment, and the cuisines of Phoenicia, ancient Greece, Rome, Carthage, and later Byzantium. Pottinger's Human says, I think they must have put some crack in Diet Citrus Drop. Everything is looking brighter after finishing off some. And he also says, I also thought about getting my own dehydrator. A lot of times I will get a bunch of briskets of beef, around 20 pounds each, and freeze them until I use them. I would love to make some jerky. Am says, isn't Worcestershire? But this is what people did. See, if there's no internet, what the hell do you do all day? It's so boring. Do you remember how boring it was in the 90s? So what the hell do you do all day? Well, you can make foods, you can make alcohol, you can make wine, you can make your beef jerky. But these days we're like, well, we're on the computer, right? Am says, isn't Worcestershire sauce supposed to be based on garum? Pottinger says, so what's the verdict on the Neo-Druids? Are they legit or is it newly made nonsense? Honestly, that's newly made nonsense. The newly made Druids, it's absolute nonsense. Unfortunately, because there's no link between them and the Druids at all. They're just, what they're doing is ritual. If you see some of their rituals, like I watched one in the 1960s, they unsheath a sword and push it back in, bit of the dub via night kind of thing, and it's fanciful stuff that would come out of the 19th or 20th century, and it would be so different to how they would have been, Pottinger says oyster sauce is better than Worcester. Yeah, it is. Worcester sauce is kind of disgusting, isn't it? Like, it's kind of disgusting. It's good on chicken, but not much else, And oyster sauce is very nice, invented by a Chinaman, 100 or 200 years ago, who actually, didn't he burn another sauce? And then, he burned some oysters, and then he said, the sauce is actually, it makes some sauce. It's pretty good. And then caramel, oh my God. Woo! Yeah. Jenny says, that sounds like fun. Link your other channel. Okay, I'll provide a link to my chemistry channel that I established, because some of you may not know about it. But I haven't had time to make a video because I need to fix a table which is broken. And so I'll just hang on a second. I'll just get the link to it. You see, I'm now down to 46.9 subscribers, and it was 47.7 2 years ago. So that's what the shadow band does. But whatever, stuff them. But here we go. That's my chemistry channel. See if it works. And it's, oh no, that's my normal channel. Whoops. Let me try that again. Okay. Chemistry channel. There it is. That's the chemistry channel. Second subtitle, I feel like. Okay, so and we're going to do great experiments on that channel. Like, wow. Yeah. Okay. Am says, fighting words, Pottinger. Or is it 3 days only until the 21st? Shabib says 3 days until 21st, Matty. What do you predict? I've barely been able to see it. It's overcast all the time. And then it sets. It's overcast and then it sets. What are your predictions? Look, no, I don't think anything's going to happen when it hits. It's already happening all year because it's close together. That's enough. It doesn't have to hit. It's close together. That's it. It's happening. Pottinger says aliens in the lake. So you're talking about Lake in Canberra. Yeah, there's a book I have on Australian mysteries, and it mentions this lake, and people have seen monsters in it, but they can't. It's a new lake. Chris says, I actually have a few theories that it's connected with the stone welding you specifically looked into. Old Hittite Stonehenge and base stones of Baalbek are all similar. Egypt, Mayan. Austin says Canberra has drop bears. International viewer may not know about these. I know a guy who lost an arm. I'm sure everyone who isn't Australian knows about drop bears. Gumby says, wonderful, Charles. So good to see you talk about crazy stuff. How's the pipe? How about pipes in Chinese mountains? Gumby, pipes in Chinese mountains sounds absolutely intriguing, but I don't know anything about it. Maltman says Loch Ness appears in the Life of St. Columba by Adam Nunn, written in the 6th century AD. I was not aware of this, but that's fascinating. That's a lot of hoaxes. You know what? Where there's I would say there's an awful lot of smoke for where there isn't supposed to be a fire. Yeah. Pottinger says, oh boy, sounds like they watched Excalibur a couple times to make their religion. Yeah, you're right. So in Excalibur, everyone's got bright shining armor of the 15 and 1600s. They almost look like conquistadors, actually. Thereafter's notes. So Jenny says, I just made Caesar dressing tonight with Worcestershire. Funny synchronicity. It is indeed, but nothing works without a synchronicity. It looks like synchronicity makes things happen. Or something like that. Okay. Another dork says, there's a standing stone near my house where people used to take turf from around it with them when they went to court, like it held authority. Thought that was interesting. Yes, you could put it that way, because it seems that all primitive mounds and pyramids were built by turf taken from fertile bits around the country and placed into the pyramid or mound. That's an Irish tradition that because the mound became a place of fertility, and stones are always a place of fertility. So you take the turf from there, you put it in your infertile garden, and the garden will become fertile. Yeah. And placing the pyramids in the middle of Egypt, it probably contains soil from everywhere in Egypt. Would have made all the fertile places around Egypt would have made all of Egypt fertile because by a synchronicity, because they're giving fertility to those soils that are inside the pyramid, as above, so below, and that's something that was used in every primordial mound. That was an ancient technology there, a magical technology. Pottinger says, I do love Merlin in that movie though. Patrick says the Earth is flat. No, I'm really shadow bad enough to saying that. Austin said only 3 people in the world know the recipe for Worcestershire sauce. Really? That might explain why it doesn't taste very good. Pottinger says there are probably all sorts of lake and stream monsters that ate people before the overfishing came along. Nowadays, people don't fish in rivers much, but it used to be insane. It did, didn't it? I mean, that's what fly fishing is. It's kind of, what is it, river fishing, isn't it? I mean, it's fishing on top or something like that. Yeah, fishing on top of the, invented in England. Chris says, there's also a really big-time stamp on Angkor Wat, specifically stone carvings, super fancy and pristine, of Gomphotheres, 4-tusked elephants that we know disappeared between 400,000 to 10,000 years ago. Wow. Patrick says, thanks for the reminder, Austin. I had everything for a Bloody Mary and forgot the Worcestershire sauce. Don't forget the chili, but don't use too much because too much chili sauce will spoil that drink. Yeah, really. You need almost nothing. Just almost nothing in there. Sounds bloody. Pottinger says, that's in a Bloody Mary. Sounds bloody. Mate, that's not the worst of it. It's got celery sticks in it as well. You're presumably supposed to eat those. Thomas says, just watched the Electric Universe documentary again, the one about Saturn and Jupiter, with Mars and Venus in the center being visible from the Earth before the cataclysm. It's interesting. Thomas says, real fascinating stuff. I mean, maybe the 21st century is a sign of things to come. Patrick says, the world is covered. By mysteries from the past. It is. Chris says, we just did start Solar Cycle 25. Gumby said, what's the mound the Great Pyramid is built on? It's built on a rock mound, which it incorporates. And maybe something was there before. Pottinger says, maybe the 23rd people were wrong and the 21st is the end of the world. We could badly use a reset. Austin said, moving soil around makes sense. Good microbes are good for the human gut. Yeah. Yeah, well, they found, for example, there's a place in Ireland called Navan Fort. And I went there innocently enough. And what I discovered was, when I was in the museum next to it, it was so rainy outside, I had to hide in the museum. And I discovered it was the basis of the pyramid religion. A mound was created. Firstly, it has two rings inside a ring. One ring is a mound, which is a round feasting house, which had an oak tree in the middle of it. They see the rings, which was then burnt down and soil put on top. They did the same with longhouses in mainland Europe, turned them into long mounds. So a feasting hall of the ancestors of Valhalla became a long barrow, right? So next to this, at Navan Fort in Ireland, was another mound. They said this was a mystery. So they started analysing the soil, and they found out the soil comes from different parts of Ireland, different other regions. I have read many books about the building of pyramids in Mexico, etc., and it was the tradition to bring soils from other parts of the world. And this is in many mounds around Europe. Bring soil from not other parts of the world, other parts of the country. You bring soil from other parts of the country. Then the pyramid acts as a fertility center because it's located in the center of the country where the Yggdrasil is supposed to have been. And then this fertilizes those soils. So by synchronicity, which is how magic works, synchronicity, those soils become fertile, which affects the soils in the regions they have been brought from. So do you see the pyramid as a fertility machine? That is what one of the things a pyramid is for. And I thought, damn, this is what the pyramid religion is for. When I saw that at Navan Fort and I read the exhibits and I saw that's what it's for. You see what I mean? Yeah. But of course, the pyramid's also pointing to the cardinal points and, you know, because centered and aligned, and it's got a bit more to it. Yeah. So Jenny says, watch the Primer Fields video on David LaPoncha. I'm getting a bit tired. I'll wrap up in 5 minutes. But yeah, just so you know. Jenny says, if you like Electric Universe, you'll really love the Primer Fields video. And I've still got some coffee, but 5 minutes, we'll wrap it up. You'll really love the Primer Fields videos on David LaPont channel. Also, see the Pattern channel procession playlist. Gareth's, would that be Gareth? Gareth Ike? Gareth's whole channel is amazing. Expanding Earth. Exanding Earth. Maltman says turf mounds could turn to stone. Sandbag walls from World War I have since turned to stone, aka coral. Shakabra says the cataclysm destroyed our whole solar system. Pottinger says, so it was kind of like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but with rock instead of mashed potato. Patrick says, I figured out the old calendar to the new, e.g. have fun with the date and prophecies. March 11, 12, 2024. Well, we're going to have to wait a long time to see if you're right, but okay. Jenny says, expanding her videos. He just did makes so much sense how the continent's separated. Chris says, whoever did the one dislike for this video show, I got a lot of people I've offended, because sometimes if someone leaves a rude comment, I actually leave a rude comment back and then block them. And I've offended a huge amount of people. Whoever offended me first, so there are lots of thumbs down. They're like, they're so angry. They're so angry about it. They're so angry. They're like, oh. Austin says, just found you today. I've subscribed. Thank you, Austin. Wow, and you're so knowledgeable too. Brian says, damn, just got here. Supper. I'm just about to leave. Another dog says, like that, but we'll be back soon for another live video. Yeah. Another dog says, just like the high towers in Ireland, a fertility tower. Aha, there's probably older than people say. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Woohoo. Oh, yeah, yeah. Roxy Rocks is excited about the conjunction. Yeah, Ken Wheeler. Oh, Ken Wheeler is amazing. Yeah, so Jenny's recommending different channels. Ken Wheeler is a very clever man indeed. Yeah, well, and Gumby says, love hearing from one of the experts. Look into these ancient pipes in Chinese mountains. I'll keep trying to get your live streams. Yeah, I don't do many live streams, but I will try and do them like, I'll try and do them like every few days, honestly. I just do them whenever I'm kind of, a bit bored. Or I just want to chill out a bit. But I'll try and do them more often because I do like to talk to you guys, although I'm cognizant of the fact that it's just me talking, so it's a little bit selfish. But I mean, I am reading what you're saying as well, so we're having a conversation, Yeah. Thank you, Patrick. So thank you, everyone. We'll log off and thank you, everyone. Love you all. Will says YouTube no notification. Look. Do you see my subscribers are going south? It's now 46.9. It was 47.7 a couple of years ago. It's YouTube is garbage. It's turned to garbage. It's gone corporate. They've sold out. What can we do? Whatever, They don't want ancient mysteries. They want mainstream non-mysteries. Yeah, they want mainstream non-mysteries. Yeah, they don't want any mysteries. They don't like to have any mysteries. We know everything already. Right. Okay, guys. So yeah, 3 hours exactly, 26 minutes we've been talking. Love you all. Cheers, Roxy Rocks. Brian, see ya. Have an awesome day, everyone. Have an awesome night in America. Love you all. Later. It's a kid. Yeah. Bye-bye.